humans biologically are carnivore. That's the best thing for us. I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you.
Okay, today I'm joined by a very special guest, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, first doctor on the podcast, I think. Could you start with like a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Yeah. So my name is Dr. Anthony Chaffee. As you said, I'm an American doctor currently practicing in Australia. I'm specializing in neurosurgery, so I'm still in my neurosurgical residency, but I've had a particular interest into diet, nutrition, how that affects health and chronic disease. And I've incorporated that into my own life over the past 23 years and now into my practice as a physician.
Yeah, and the diet that we're talking about is the carnivore diet, so just
That's
animal
it.
products. So I know you've done this on many podcasts, so I think we should quickly cover this before people think you're crazy. Why do you think, like some evidence for why you think we are carnivores?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the crux of it, is that we should be eating our biologically appropriate diet, whatever we are biologically adapted to, what we're designed to eat. And all the best evidence shows that biologically, evolutionarily, through the fossil record and comparative anatomy and physiologically, that humans are carnivores. And not only is it better to eat more meat, which it is, that's where we get the basis of our nutrition. There are certain nutrients that are essential that we cannot get from any other source apart from meat. But it's actually better to not eat fruits and vegetables, which is obviously a very different take than people have, and possibly quite controversial. But it's not controversial in the world of biology and botany. We teach people in grade school, middle school, that plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more poisonous, so less and less animals can eat them, so they can survive and thrive. And then animals becoming more and more adapted to specific poisons in specific plants, so that they can eat that plant and survive and thrive. So this is why a koala would eat eucalyptus. Almost nothing else eats eucalyptus, because the koala has the defenses and the ability to break down the toxins in eucalyptus. But it doesn't have defenses against other things. It's not able to detoxify other plants, and so it just sticks with the eucalyptus. And there's, every example in the wild is like this. Animals eat very, very specific plants in the wild, if they eat plants at all, and many don't. 66% of animal species are carnivorous. And so they're not eating any plants at all, and it's because they don't have these defenses. They also can't necessarily convert plant tissue into animal tissue. That's actually quite a difficult feat. And converting fiber into fat and protein, which is what herbivores who eat fibrous plants do, is very difficult as well. No vertebrate animal is able to do that. And so they have to cultivate in their gut the special bacteria that are able to break down fiber, and they actually eat the fiber. The bacteria consume the fiber, and as a byproduct, release saturated fat and protein. So a gorilla that just eats green leaves get about 70% of its calories from saturated fat, and the rest of it is mostly from protein. Cows get upwards of 80% or up towards 80% of their calories from saturated fat. So we don't have that ability. We have lost that ability. So that tells you right there that that's not our food source. That's not the food source that we should be eating. We have an appendix, a little small vestigial organ that used to be a 4-foot long cecum, and that's where fiber would pack into and break down into short chain fatty acids. So we don't have that anymore. In a chimpanzee or a gorilla, actual herbivorous primates, they have that ability. They have that very long cecum, and that's where fiber packs into. So we lost that. And there are a number of other adaptations to our biology and our physiology that point that way. I mean, another simple example is a lot of these nutrients. First of all, you cannot get complete nutrition from plants and fungi for humans. You have to eat meat to fill that. But a lot of these nutrients, even if they say, spinach has quite a lot of iron, that iron is not bioavailable. It's bound up in ways that we can't access. We don't have the biology and physiology necessary to extract that iron very well, or niacin in corn. We can't do that. And so traditionally we have populations who were poor and couldn't necessarily survive on the amount of meat that was available to them. And they had to try to subsist on different plants. but they had different chemical processes that would put them through to sort of make these nutrients more bioavailable and maybe tamp down some of the poisons. This is why you soak beans like kidney beans for several hours, and then you have to cook them at boiling point for at least a certain period of time, or else they're extremely toxic. As little as 5 kidney beans undercooked can put you in the hospital or put an adult in the hospital. So that's because of these poisons that exist. So that and a number of other reasons is why I think that it's optimal to eat just a high fat meat based diet, because fat is actually good for you. That's been falsely vilified, and specifically exclude plant products, and certainly processed plant products, which is what sugars and carbs and things like that. These are all plant products, and so the majority of people are actually eating a plant based diet. It's just this processed plant based diet, and it's quite harmful. So that's why I think so meat's good, vegetables are bad.
Yeah. I think that would shock a lot of people if they found out that gorillas and cows are getting upwards of 70% of their energy from saturated fat. But yeah, you have that really compelling video on your YouTube channel called Why We Are Carnivores, slide presentation with Anthony Chaffee. And I think that's such a compelling video. It's about an hour long. Definitely recommend people to check that out. But yeah, some of the quick other things is the shoulder joint. We're very good at throwing. Our brain has actually shrunk since the agricultural revolution.
That's right.
We don't have flat teeth. People say we do, but if you close your mouth and you can't slide your jaws over each other. 4 organs to absorb fat. Yeah, okay. The list goes on. So I think the evidence for high meat diet is very compelling. I'm not sure I would say definitely carnivore, but definitely high meat.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that my main goal is just to try to undo the vilification of meat. Meat is not bad for you. Saturated fat, animal fats are not bad for you. They're actually the stuff of life. The animal kingdom runs on saturated fat, and we run on animal fat. We're not able to really extract the right nutrients out of plants. We have to get them from meat. We have to get them from fat. And I think we've been I think we've suffered as a result. And I think a lot of the chronic diseases that we're treating these days are actually a result of not eating correctly to our species. And, if you ask any zookeeper, they'll say, if you feed an animal something that doesn't eat in the wild, something that it didn't evolve on, it gets very sick. Well, what does it get sick with? It gets the so-called human diseases. And they even say that. They get human diseases like obesity, diabetes, cancer, damage to the heart, liver, and arthritis and autoimmune issues, cancer. Animals in the wild don't get cancer normally, and zoo animals don't get cancer normally if they are eating what they're supposed to eat. But you feed dogs and cats who are known carnivores a bunch of kibble and plant-based nonsense because it's cheap and it's a filler. They actually get these so-called human diseases as well, and they get cancer and other things. And veterinarians are now saying that noticing that there's actually a rise in the so-called human diseases in domesticated pets. And that you can't catch diabetes from someone. You can't catch cancer from someone. You can't catch Crohn's disease from someone. So if we're eating what we're eating and we're getting these diseases, and that prevalence is going up, and in fact in other areas it used to never happen at all. That's why they used to be called Western diseases. And people from the West would go to indigenous areas and they would notice that, wow, these guys aren't getting the same diseases we're getting. So these are so-called Western diseases. Well, when those indigenous populations started eating Western food, they started getting Western diseases, and now we call them human diseases, forgetting the history there. And now we're saying that dogs and cats are getting human diseases, and that zoo animals can get human diseases if you feed them human food. So that means it's the food that's causing the disease. And this is why you have signs at parks and zoos and things like that say, don't feed the animals. It makes them sick. And that's why. But it also makes us sick. And we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that diabetes is not a disease, that Crohn's is not a disease, that rheumatoid arthritis is not a disease, that these are actually toxicities. We are poisoning ourselves and malnourishing ourselves, and our bodies aren't working properly. And so I think the main thing that people should hopefully do and take away from this is, A, don't eat processed garbage. Don't be afraid of meat and animal fat. And just understand that this is the nature of plants, that all living things have a defense. or else they're not living anymore. They will be driven down into extinction. And while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. And so they have to use other means of defense. And one of their main defenses is this chemical defense, actually being poisonous, or at least being chemically disruptive to animals trying to eat them.
Yeah. You mentioned Crohn's there. I remember hearing Mr. Beast, large YouTuber, saying how, I think it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, how he didn't think there was anything he could do about it. And I was just sitting there like, oh my God, this guy needs to try a carnivore diet, please.
I actually messaged him like several months back, but the guy has millions and millions of people that follow him, and probably thousands of people that message him a day. So no reply yet, but yeah, 100% Crohn's goes away on a carnivore diet. I've yet to see it not go away. I have seen this in hundreds of people personally now, and like you look on the different Facebook groups, the autoimmune groups that try carnivore, there's literally thousands to tens of thousands of people around the world that are doing this and talking about it and going over it. There was a Harvard study looking at different, over 2,000 people tried carnivore and say like, what were your health effects? And nearly everyone improved it in some way. In fact, I think it was like actually everyone improved dramatically in different health markers, and a lot of those things were diabetes and autoimmune diseases, especially. We even have this in the current literature for allopathic medicine. So there's a number of studies with Crohn's disease specifically that show the effects that food have on the disease. And in fact, if you go onto an elemental diet, there's a study that looks at elemental diets, which is just a powder. It's highly processed. I mean, it's just in a can, right? But it has like all the nutrients we need, all the macro and micronutrients, and the best ones are without carbohydrates. So those are generally for people with keto, that are on a keto diet because they have epilepsy. The keto diet has been studying epilepsy for around 100 years, and it's extremely effective. That gets superseded by the pharmacology. They just say, look, it's easier just to prescribe something. Just give them a pill, and that I think that's just lazy medicine and bad medicine, because if you can get somebody off medication, you should as a doctor. So people with Crohn's, they can take the same elemental diet and just get the nutrients and not any of the extra whatever. And these studies found that on a full elimination diet, elemental diet, that this was a better treatment for an acute flare-up of Crohn's disease than prednisolone or prednisone, like these hardcore steroids that will just stop almost any autoimmune issue in their tracks, right? But it has a lot of side effects, and this is it's not safe to be on these things long term. But to get something out of an acute flare-up where it's really, really bad, you really just smash down the immune system. And so just changing their diet, just eliminating out those things from the diet, was a better treatment than steroids, right? So that's incredible. And then there's another study that looked at, compared to two groups, was a randomized controlled trial looking at eliminating out carbohydrates and fiber. You don't have too much after that. It's basically you're just eating meat and fat at that point. There's not too many plants that you can eat that don't have carbs and don't have fiber. Right? But anyway, so you just, however you want to do it, you eliminate out carbs and fiber, and then contrasted that with a group that did not eliminate carbs and fiber. And they found that the group that eliminated carbs and fiber stayed in remission of their Crohn's disease, specifically Crohn's disease, stayed in remission on average 51 months, right? So that's over 4 years that they stayed in remission on average. And then contrast that with the control group that did not change their diet, just kept eating carbs and fiber. They stayed in remission on average 0 months. So big difference there. And that shows very clearly that there is something in those carbs and that fiber, or whatever contain the carbs and fiber, that is causing Crohn's disease, because it's not a disease. It's an environmental exposure. And this is a poisoning sort of scenario. And the most important thing you do with toxic exposure is you remove the exposure, and you try to let the body heal after that, and maybe use medicines or whatever to facilitate that. But first and foremost, you remove the exposure. And we're not doing that. All we're doing is treating symptoms and just sort of trying to mitigate this problem. And that is not going to address the core issue. That's never going to cure anyone. That's never going to get anyone better. And so I think we really need to just revamp how we look at medicine and approach these diseases as doctors.
Yeah. So yeah, just quickly, Crohn's is like inflammation of the intestines, right, or stomach, something like
Yeah.
that.
So it's one of the inflammatory bowel diseases. So like IBD. So Crohn's and ulcerative colitis would be the ones that people mostly suffer with. It causes a lot of pain, a lot of inflammation. You can have different sorts of effects in the rest of the body as well, and you get copious amounts of bloody diarrhea. So a lot of people, when they're in a flare up of Crohn's, they'll be having 20 to 30 loose motions a day of blood, just bloody diarrhea 20, 30 times a day. And so when you're in that situation, you're racked with pain, and you can't be more than, a few steps away from a toilet. That's extremely debilitating. And then so these people are put on extremely heavy medications that are immunosuppressants and carry all sorts of different problems long term. If you're on a long-term immunosuppressant, your risk of cancer goes way up, your infections go way up, you have a lot of other problems because your immune system is important. It's doing a very, very vital job. But in some of these people, it's attacking their own body as well. But what we're coming to understand now is that it's actually your body is attacking something in the food that you're eating, that through different sort of damage in your gut. So sometimes called leaky gut, that these are sort of slipping through, getting to your body attacks them, make these antibodies, and then people have what's called molecular mimicry. And those antibodies towards whatever it's attacking are similar enough to parts of your own body that there's a spillover effect and it starts attacking your own body. It was originally thought that this then sensitized your body to attack itself, and then your body started making more and more antibodies towards yourself. But I don't think that's the case, because when you eliminate out these foods, the antibody levels just go down. And I see this in my practice. Outside of neurosurgery, I have a private practice in functional medicine and metabolic health, and we track people's autoimmune issues, and we track many different sorts of issues, and you can actually measure the antibodies for various things, say Hashimoto's, and then you sort of remove out these foods, you put them on a strict elimination diet, like a carnivore diet, and people with autoimmune issues have to be more strict than others. You just meat and water, usually just red meat and water, and we notice that their antibodies track down and their thyroid function improves, or they stop having these loose motions, they stop having this bloody diarrhea, they stop having all these symptoms of their autoimmune issues. So it's a very, very, very devastating illness, Crohn's disease is. But these other ones are as well, like rheumatoid arthritis. If you actually look in the medical literature, we've been treating rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and gout and a lot of other things since the 1800s with a pure red meat and water diet. This is where the Salisbury steak came from. It's like a bunless hamburger. I always thought it was from Salisbury, England, like a place name. But it's actually named after Dr. J.H. Salisbury, who's a New York doctor in the 1800s and did a 30-year research project into the optimal nutrition for human beings, and found, living with the Native Americans who just ate meat and they were living to be 115, 120 years old. People think that's far-fetched, but we actually teach genetics students now that genetically we're actually designed to live on average 120 years. So actually that's meeting exactly perfect with what we would expect if you weren't meeting with, some sort of something that killed you early. And so he found that people this is long before processed sugar, processed foods, processed carbs, and things like that. So he just found that people that were eating more, vegetables and grains and fruits and things like that, they were just getting diseases other people simply weren't. And that you could eliminate them and actually cure them by putting them on a pure red meat and water diet, beef for preference, lamb as a distant second preference. And he found that you could actually do this. You was curing rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and other sorts of issues 100 years before any sort of effective medications were around. And this actually went on for a long time. There's a book as recently as 1975 by a gastroenterologist, it was Dr. Vogtland, spelled very strangely. I don't know it offhand. But it's called the Stone Age diet. And he basically argued that humans are carnivores. This is the kind of animal that we are. And that the modern, diseases, these chronic diseases, are from eating outside of that. And he argued, he was a gastroenterologist, he argued that basically if you don't eat plants, that his profession didn't need to exist. As a gastroenterologist, these things just go away. And then in 1977, the USDA declared that cholesterol causes heart disease, saturated fat increases cholesterol, therefore meat's bad, therefore fat's bad, fat's bad, therefore meat's bad, therefore eggs are bad. And 100 years of scientific research and medical research just went right out the window. And we're in the state that we are now with all of these diseases tripling, quintupling, sextupling, or more. And it's just getting worse. So we need to rediscover that and understand what's underlying it.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get into it now, but I think people, if you go and look at like how the science for saturated fat and heart disease and cholesterol, and there's a lot of suspicious things going on there, let's just say.
Well documented ones too, And so, just the sugar industry, paid off multiple very renowned professors and scientists to falsify data and publish fraudulent research. That's not an opinion. That's a well-documented historical fact. The Journal of the American Medical Association published in 2016 actual internal memos from the Sugar Association back in the the 50s and 60s talking about how they paid off because there was evidence and research showing that actually sugar was associated with heart disease. And so they put out industry research, and they, in their own documentation, detailed how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease when it was really sugar. And one of those and to exonerate sugar. And one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and it was he who authored and published the 1977 USDA declaration saying that. And that just changed the world. And we know it was fraud. We know it was bought and paid for. And people like Ansel Keys, another person we have clear documentation that he was paid off. This is a matter of record. So this isn't, I have this epidemiological study and I did this survey of 23 people and I asked them on their phone how they, no, this is just a hard fact. Cholesterol was never the problem. Cholesterol never was even associated with heart disease. And that's actually what the large studies more recently are showing, that there is no association between higher LDL cholesterol or saturated fat. The Journal of the American College of Cardiology has actually published in 2020 a large literature review of all the available evidence and meta-analyses showing that there is no risk, there is no association between saturated fat and heart disease. In fact, they find an inverse relationship between saturated fat and consumption and stroke. So the more saturated fat you eat, the lower your stroke rate and vice versa. So this was a fraud perpetuated on everyone. And the information is there if people want to look into it more.
Yeah. I've been kind of looking into the, I guess you call it, longevity field recently, and also carnivores have talked about it as well. Like, we're not really supposed to age, if that makes sense. We're not supposed to get sick and then die. I think people talk about it's like a square. Our health's supposed to stay like at a high level, and then we just drop off and die. Whereas a lot of people decline as they age. They're like in nursing homes for the last 30 years of their life. That's not how it's supposed to be.
No, yeah. Well, that's not how animals in the wild or even in the zoo manifest. When they're able to get the resources that they need. See an animal in the zoo, they're not getting sicker and older, and their teeth are falling out, and they get diabetes, and unless they're being fed the wrong thing. But yeah, you're right. They just sort of they go until they just that's it, and they die. And people used to do that as well. That's what you did. You're a Stone Age nomad, and you couldn't just wither away in a nursing home. There weren't any. And so, and so these people that, Salisbury observed in the 1800s, they were actually quite pale and hardy. These were again, Stone Age nomads living, following buffalo herds with, pack on their back day in and day out. These weren't just sitting in a nursing home turning to dust for 40 years. They were actually like healthy, active, vibrant adults that happen to be 120 years old.
Yeah. Bringing it back to like eating the consistent diet, we even see with indigenous cultures today, like the Hadza and like the Maasai in Tanzania. I think they mainly eat meat, but they also eat like a few roots every now and then, a bit of honey and some fruit. They also didn't get these diseases until I think recently they've started to get some more Western foods. So that's another thing. Like there's proof today that humans aren't supposed to just decline like this.
Yeah, and it will. I mean, I learned this when I was a kid that when eating a Western diet, Native Americans were 4 times as likely to get obesity, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and all the rest of these chronic diseases. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, well, doesn't that mean that the food is causing the disease? Because if they don't eat the food, they don't get the disease. And we eat the food and we get the disease, we just get it at a lower rate. And what's a non-Western diet? What are they eating that we're not? And vice versa. Well, no one told me at the time, but they were high-fat carnivores who just ate meat and the fat from meat whenever possible. And maybe they knew which plants to use in times of privation. But when they had meat, they ate meat or used medicinally or something like that. But they used meat. That's what they ate. And the Hadza have been displaced off their land, so they don't have the normal hunting culture that they used to have. The average size of an animal that they're able to hunt on where they are now is the size of a bush baby, so it's very small, sort of that big. And that's that's not what we were doing before. You look at the fossil record. We were hunting elephants. We were hunting mammoth. We were hunting giant sloths. Megafauna, very high fat content. And when you displace people off their land, they're not able to hunt what they're supposed to hunt. So a lot of the animals aren't even in existence anymore. That really for millions of years we were hunting, and that since that megafauna died off, that's when you start seeing areas of agriculture start popping up, and because necessity really. But with the Hadza, they're eating honey and maybe some roots or whatever, because they're having to flesh out their diet. They can't just get a meat-based diet, which is what you see historically as well, even in Western countries also, that poorer people, they didn't have the same access to meat, so they were the one eating more plants. You go, like in England, say, you couldn't go hunting. Those are the king's deer, those are the king's woods, those are the king's pheasants. Like, you were not allowed to kill them. People got in big trouble or punished with some serious punishments if you were caught poaching in the king's woods. So what can you do? You have to supplement these things with plants. You have to eat whatever the hell you can eat to survive. And so even the Maasai. They're sort of a herding culture where they have a lot of sort of animals, call them cattle. They mostly drink the fat from the milk from the
blood, right?
Yeah, it's very high fat. It's like 8% milk fat, and then they'll also drink blood. So they'll make a little nick and then they'll bleed them and they'll drink that as well. Like the warrior age men will drink that because it's healthier. They need more energy and strength. And they'll eat meat as well. They eat much less, roots and honey and things like that. The vast majority, especially traditionally, is just the meat, blood, and milk. There was actually a very interesting study on that, on the Maasai, published in the Journal of American Medical Association. I think it was a British study. They were down, and they noticed that the Maasai had neighbors called the Akikuyu, which were sort of just next to them. And they were also displaced off their land, and they weren't able to hunt and do all these sorts of things. So they actually moved to a very plant-based, plant-rich diet. And they were eating mostly plants and roots and tubers and leaves and fruits and things like that, and grains. And so this was a vegan's dream. This was whole food, plant-based diet, like no pesticides, no chemical runoff, all that sort of stuff. It's just plants in nature, and just what they say that we should all be doing. And so they were doing that. And the very interesting thing about this study was that they were neighbors and they intermarried. So they were actually genetically similar populations. And what they found was that the Maasai, who were really just eating, a meat-based diet, animal nutrient diet, the adult men were on average 5 inches taller, 23 pounds heavier of lean muscle mass, so very, very slender, lean, strong people. So not an ounce of fat on them. And they were 50% stronger. And not only that, these physical characteristics that have, and this just shows you what early nutrition matters in our development. Like you will be, if you don't get proper nutrition, you will be shorter. You will be, you will have smaller brains. You will have crooked teeth. You have smaller jaws. You won't be as strong. You won't have the muscle density or bone density as if you were properly nourished. And so, but they also found that they were very deplete in various nutrients. They were anemic. They had low iron. They had low vitamins and minerals of other sorts. Very low in B12 and Akikuyu, I should say. And had a lot of other issues. They got infections more readily. They were getting chest infections. They were getting ulcers. They were getting all sorts of health problems. And they found that if they just replaced the nutrients, just supplemented the nutrients that they were missing, that they wouldn't actually improve their health. But so that goes to the other vegan argument that it's like, well, you can get proper nutrition, you just take supplements. It's like, well, no, actually, that's not good enough. But when they started replacing what they were eating with meat, and they gave them meat, that actually did fix their health. Now, you're not going to make them grow 5 inches. That's done. The growth plates are capped and sealed, and so that's it. So you never get a chance to develop twice. But their health improved dramatically, and they started being able to fight off these infections and heal these sores, and got much better from health that way. So there's something more in the meat. It's not just you're not just replacing certain nutrients. There's probably other nutrients that we don't even know about yet, that we haven't cataloged, that are in meat that you need, and especially like the essential fatty acids. But also there are things in plants that cause harm, and so you're removing these harmful agents, and you're reintroducing these proper diet, and people got better. So it's pretty straightforward, and that's the only study that we have that actually compares what we're talking about, which is a whole food plant-based diet with a whole food meat-based diet. All the other studies, all the epidemiological studies that say, oh, if you eat more fruits and vegetables, this is better, they only compare that to a processed food garbage diet. Yeah. No kidding. Like I'm so shocked that that's happening. So, but that's not what we're talking about. You're not comparing like to like. And so if you want to extrapolate that to what I'm doing, which is only eating meat, I've been doing this for 23 years now, and then you have to look at studies that compare like to like, and that's really the only one we have.
Yeah, I would say like a lot of people, and I included, think you look great for your age. Aren't you early 40s or something?
Yeah, I'm 43.
Yeah. And there's a common thing that people say is like, don't blame the meat for what the bun, the soda, and the chips did. And I think that's so true.
That's it. 100%. Yeah. Well, they get lumped in these same epidemiological studies. They say, well, how often you go to fast food? Like, oh, okay, twice a week. Well, oh, look at that. He eats meat twice a week. So they count those things as meat. They don't actually itemize those things. Okay, they're eating meat, and they're eating bread, and they're eating, seed oils and potatoes and sugary sauces and things like that. They just say that's meat. They do that with pizza as well. They say, well, sometimes the toppings on pizza is meat, therefore pizza is meat. And then that's actually true. Those are the studies, and it's flawed on purpose. These are biased people doing these studies. A lot of the studies in nutrition and just the field of nutritional sciences in general is heavily influenced by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is religiously
vegetarian and vegan mostly.
Vegetarian, yeah. So since the 1800s, they found that people that were eating meat, they were just more healthy and had more lust for life, and wanted to procreate more and have kids, which is what you're supposed to do when you're healthy, and that's what your biology tells you to do. They looked at this as being you're more lustful. So meat makes you lustful. Therefore, meat is sinful. Meat is bad. Meat is evil. So that is actually what they thought, and so they have been on a absolute mission to get meat out of people's diets since the 1800s. Is where Kellogg cereal comes from. That was Dr. Kellogg, and he was just a zealot in the Seventh-day Church. But he was also a very smart man, and a doctor, and a congressman, and an extremely influential intellectual in the early 1900s in America. And he put forward all of these things. And the field of nutritional sciences was actually founded by the Seventh-day Adventist Church in, I think, 1917. And so every single college and school of nutrition is going to be heavily influenced by them, because they were the beginning. And so all the original texts and studies, they all stem from this fruit from the poison bough. And they're still putting out these studies. Loma Linda Medical Center in California is a Seventh-day Adventist church and medical school, and they put out a lot of this garbage, biased nonsense that you just look at it and be like, well, they're clearly not being honest here, calling fast food just meat, calling pizza just meat. I mean, that is fraud, and that's an intentional attempt to mislead the public. And these were people that were on the board of the WHO when they said that red meat was a likely carcinogen. 30% of these people, I believe, or thereabouts, were either vegan, vegetarian, or Seventh-day Adventists, or all three. And the people that dissented is to say, look, you're cherry picking here. You're excluding studies that show the exact opposite of what you're saying, and you guys are biased. You should, declare your biases. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. And so, because the WHO said it, everyone hangs their hat on it, saying, oh, look, WHO said. Well, the WHO also has a website talking about all the natural poisons in plants that we eat all the time, and talking about all these things, how millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, rely on these foods that if you don't detoxify appropriately could kill you. And they talk about how they can kill you and do kill you if not done properly. So, that I would trust that more, especially because I know of their biases. I know that they're pushing a plant-based agenda, but these are hard facts. Like these chemicals exist. They have names. We can quantify them and categorize them and catalog them, and they have been. And we have documented episodes of people being poisoned by these things, going to the hospital or dying from them. And so that's hard evidence, whereas the rest of it is garbage, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing the WHO does say, the World Health Organization, is if you go to their website, it says like kids, I think it's up to 5 or 2, need as like much high quality protein as possible. And it doesn't really specify unless you scroll down, but you go down and it says like the highest quality protein is dairy, meat, seafood, which is kind of contrary to what they usually say. Which is another funny thing with the people say, oh, you should have a low protein diet when you're young and high when you're old. So how does that make any sense?
No, I mean, you need a high protein diet throughout your life, basically. And in the extremes of age, it's even more important. When you're sort of, your age, you don't necessarily need, like if you're trying to put on muscle, things like that, then yeah, you need more protein. But as you age, you get older, your demand for protein actually does go up. But when it's highest is when you're growing and developing, and you're trying to, you're growing, 6 feet, that's, you get a lot of protein at that point. That's the thing too. People say is like, well, the WHO is like, well, you say that this is flawed by the WHO, but you're quoting this other thing by the WHO. It's just like, right, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And these articles are written by different people. It's not the WHO. This is not an entity or a being that is putting this thing out. This is a large multinational organization that have thousands of people writing these articles. And so the person who put out the nonsense about meat being a possible carcinogen are not the same people writing this about these botanical toxins. So that's what people have to understand. It's and that's ad hominem anyway. You're saying it's like, well, the WHO, I'm just not going to trust anything you say because it's the WHO. It's like, well, look, it's either right or it's not. And there's evidence to show that those things saying that red meat's a likely carcinogen is garbage and is flawed and is biased. Whereas their article talking about these botanical toxins and these episodes of harm. I mean, these are well documented facts. I mean, read any book on botany or horticulture. This will tell you this. Just literally anything. Just study that field. No one does because it's boring as hell. I I have a degree in biology and biochemistry. And even I was looking at botany classes. And I'm like, oh God, why would you? But thankfully, I did take some of these things, and so I learned these things from in the course of my undergraduate degree, and took cancer biology and learned how many hundreds of carcinogens are just in everyday produce that we eat all the time. That's why I stopped eating plants 23 years ago. It was because my cancer biology professor went over this and said, talking about how there was 23 years ago, we'd already identified 136 known human carcinogens just in Brussels sprouts. and over 100 in mushrooms,
Plants are trying to
and
kill you.
dozens and dozens in every other plant and produce that you would ever come across in a grocery store. And certainly in the wild. I mean, if you go in the wild, almost every single plant on earth is inedible, right? You have inedible plants and edible plants, right? Why are they inedible? Because they taste bad? Because they'll kill you. That's why. Because they're extraordinarily toxic. The other ones are toxic too. It's just we have more of a defense against them. So, but some of these things cause harm. They cause inflammation. They cause damage to our mitochondria and our DNA, and they can precipitate as cancer down the road. But even if they don't cause cancer, they cause a lot of harm in their wake. And the only reason they're going to be able to cause cancer is if they're disrupting your cellular metabolism to such an extent that it just goes completely haywire and turns into cancer. And so we were learning that. We were blown away by this and shocked. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, how can that possibly be? He must be joking. We realized he wasn't. And I remember thinking in my head, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he just looked at us, and he just sort of, I always remember the look on his face. He just had this sort of like quizzical look, like, how are you guys not getting this? And he just hammered it home by saying, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. And so I was like, that was it for me. I just said, okay, that's it. I'm not eating plants. And I went to the grocery store. There's everything on the shelves were plants or based on plants or had plants in the ingredients. And I was just bemused. I was like, what the hell do I eat? I didn't know what there was. And I came across some eggs, and I was like, okay, eggs. I guess I'll get some eggs. Those don't come from plants. And I went over on the meat aisle. I'm like, okay, meat. I'll grab a pack of ground beef. I'm like, hey, eggs and meat. And it was weird at first. I was looking at all the things I couldn't. I can't have that. I can't have that. And then after 2 weeks, I just didn't care. All I wanted was meat and eggs. I was like, these are amazing. I feel so great. And I felt amazing. And my athletic, prowess just went through the roof. My endurance, my athleticism, my fitness just took off to new heights. And, that's a direct result of giving your body exactly what it needs and eliminating out these extremely harmful chemicals. They are way more harmful than people realize. Oh, how can spinach be that bad? Ask someone with Crohn's. Because if they eat spinach, it will tear them up. And just because we don't recognize things like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or rheumatoid arthritis or whatever as, as well as, lead poisoning, we say, oh, well, those are the symptoms of lead poisoning, right? Well, these are the symptoms of plant poisoning and carb poisoning and sugar poisoning and also malnutrition. We're not getting the nutrients we're needing, and we're getting harmed by it.
Yeah. Speaking of like carbs and chemicals, a common thing that people always seem to bring up is fruit. And so yeah, I've thought that fruit is fine, right? Because the plant wants you to eat it. But more recently, been going into this more, and I only recently found out that fruit still has defense chemicals in, right? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so they do, because they want something to eat the fruit, right? To move the seed, but not necessarily you, and not necessarily any random animal. Sometimes they want highly specific animals. And you think about it this way, most fruits on earth are, again, inedible. Most berries on earth are just inedible. You get lost in the woods, you run out of food. You can't eat any random plant. We know that, but you also can't eat any random berry either. You need to know exactly what you're eating, because a lot of them can kill you. And that's because they've co-evolved with birds, a lot of these things, but they've co-evolved with something. And so a lot of these things have to go through the digestion of a bird to germinate, have the seed go through the digestive tract of a bird to germinate. A good example of this is cassowary bird, which are just frugivores. They only eat fruit, right? And there are about 150 different tropical fruits that they eat, fruits and berries. And every single one will kill you. Wow. And kill almost any other animal either as well, because if it doesn't go through a cassowary bird, that seed will not turn into a plant. And so there's no survival advantage to letting that plant letting you eat that fruit. It has to make sure that only a cassowary bird is eating it. And if anything else touches it, they're going to pay for it. And so that's just the nature of even of fruits, right? So again, most fruit, most vegetable, most berries will actually still cause serious harm or even kill you. Even in the ones that don't do that, like a tomato, right? This is a nightshade. This is a nightshade family. And we used to know about nightshades in Europe and how you don't eat anything in the nightshade family. And people went to the New World and they found these nightshades. Oh, people are eating these nightshades. That's crazy. But they saw that they were doing them in very special ways. They have potatoes, but they were peeling them. They wouldn't eat them if they're green. They wouldn't eat them if they had a root sticking out of them. Tomatoes, they would blanch them in boiling water. They'd take the skin off and they'd take all the seeds out. And they'd only do them when they're vine ripened. That minimizes and mitigates the poisons that are in these things. A lot of the poisons are in the skin, and that is a barrier protection. Insects are trying to eat it, and they get poisoned, they die. That's why you have a little hole going in, but not like all the way in. They start eat that, they get sick, they go off, and especially if they have those little bite marks in it, those are generally not safe to eat. You usually say, "Oh, that's bad. Something's been eating that." You don't eat that. Well, why is that? Because the plant has started to make more defense chemicals and poisons because it's being attacked, so it starts making more of these poisons. Because plants respond to pain. They actually have a nervous system. They respond and they can sense and respond to pain and damage, and they do something about it. They send off chemical signals. They actually send off vibrations. They scream and tell other plants like, "Hey, I'm being eaten. I'm being attacked." Or they send off chemical signals to do the same and say, "Hey, this thing is eating me." And all the plants in the area start making more poisons against that specific bug or animal. And if a different bug or animal comes in, they send a different signal and they have a different response and a different chemical going up in concentration. So we forgot that. And we also forgot that this was just what the poor people did who couldn't get meat, couldn't afford meat. And so now I remember in my lifetime, when I was a kid, you always peeled potatoes. You would skin tomatoes, do all these sorts of things to make sauce. That was a traditional Spanish and Italian pasta sauces would do that. It was just the pulp. They would get rid of the seeds. They would get rid of the skin. And now everyone's saying, "Oh, no, that's where all the vitamins are. That's where all the nutrients are. The vitamins, nutrients are all in there." So you want to keep the skin. You want the skin. The skin's really good for you. Okay. So there are more vitamins and nutrients there. Maybe. I mean, that's someone said that. I don't actually know if that's true, but I do know that there's more poison there, right? So you say, "Oh, there's more nutrients there." Yeah, well, there's a lot more poison there as well, and that's not what you want. And so, but like the different sorts of fruits, so like a tomato, there's certain things that you do to sort of mitigate that, but there are still these toxins, like in nightshade specifically, there's solanine, and this is why when a fruit is green, when it's not ripe, it's not really safe to eat. It doesn't taste good either, but it's traditionally thought and remembered and known that green tomatoes were poisonous. And that's what people say. You don't eat green tomatoes are poisonous. And people say, "Oh, well, that's silly. That's just an old wives' tale," or something like that. Okay, look, one green tomato is not going to kill you, most likely. But you keep eating them and you will get sick. And slow poison is still poison.
Yeah.
So, and there's other things too. So even the ones that we eat, anything with sugar, like fructose, tends to be more safe.
Yeah.
And that's why it's thought that fructose is like the sweetest of the carbohydrates, because we don't really know of anything that contains fructose that will kill you on the spot. It is acutely poisonous and just drop you right there. The sugar itself, the fructose itself, causes long-term harm. It's actually been shown in various randomized controlled trials which met the Bradford Hill criteria for causation to cause metabolic syndrome and fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That was by Dr. Robert Lustig of UCSF. And he's published dozens and dozens and dozens of papers on the harmful effect of fructose long-term. So even the fructose is bad for you, but in things containing fructose, they tend to be less toxic. Yeah. But even the ones that are less toxic, they still have something in them that aren't good. So all citrus fruit, for example, have what are called furanocoumarins. And these are light sensitive, so the UV light will come down, they'll react with furanocoumarin, and they'll irreversibly bind to proteins and DNA and permanently destroy them. And you can even get this on the surface of your skin. So you get some lime juice on your skin, you're squeezing limes out in the sun. You can actually, there's documented cases of people getting second-degree burns on their skin. And so, and then this is also why you can't, this is why it's contraindicated to take any sort of grapefruit or grapefruit juice or anything like that if you're on certain medications, because the furanocoumarins in grapefruit have to be detoxified. You detoxify these things with the different enzymes in your liver. And the enzyme that detoxifies the furanocoumarins in grapefruits is also the enzyme that metabolizes a bunch of various medication. And so you're either going to have too high of a concentration or too low of a concentration of your medication. It's either not going to work or it's going to be toxic. And so they say just do not take with grapefruit juice. It's not safe to do that. So, while you're mitigating, you can mitigate things with certain fruits. It's certainly not safe. It's certainly not optimal. Right? Yeah. It can be safe in the sense that you can survive on it. But is it as good as you can possibly get? No, absolutely not. The best thing you can do for yourself is just eat meat and don't eat anything else. If you're starving and you're, look, I'm lost in the woods and I don't have anything and I can't, get anything to eat, can't get an animal to eat. And I've come across an apple tree, like you bet your ass I'm going to eat some apples, or if come across something, a beehive or something like that. I'm going to try to get that honey. That's a survival technique. And that is from the best available accounts that we have, historical records included, from the explorers down in Australia and North and South America. That's generally what you found. You found these hunter-gatherer tribes were hunters first, and only when they couldn't get meat, that's when they gathered, and they tried to get other sorts of things as well. Or people that were extremely poor, they just had to eat what they had to eat. But when these people had meat, they only ate meat, and these people were extremely healthy. Worked with Weston A. Price, who was a dentist and went around the world looking at these people that had big, strong, wide jaws, had all their teeth straight and true, all their wisdom teeth came in, no cavities, no dentists. They didn't have a toothbrush either. So, this is all from diet. This is the, and they were just eating meat. They were almost exclusively eating meat, and unless they couldn't get enough meat.
Yeah. That's the same thing. If you go to some of those tribes we talked about earlier, if you ask them what's your favorite food, they all say meat. What's the best day of your life? When I got a big kill for the tribe. Bringing it back to the plant wants you to eat it kind of paradigm. Judy Cho from Nutrition with Judy kind of changed this for me a bit, which I thought was interesting. So she calls it nature's candy. And just because the plant wants you to eat it, that doesn't make it good for you. They want you to eat it in the short term and spread their seed, but the plant doesn't care about your long-term health. So you might think, oh, this tastes nice and sweet now, but like you said, there could be negatives over the long term. But one thing I did want to talk about was, I've heard there are some benefits of insulin. For example, it helps amino acids go into cells and holds onto electrolytes. I think you can use taurine to actually help with electrolytes, but is there any benefits to insulin apart from just keeping your blood sugar at a good level?
Yeah, it's a very important hormone, and it's absolutely vital for life. And I mean, you just look at type 1 diabetics and understand that you die without insulin. And it's very, very important. You wither away, you waste away, and you eventually die. So, insulin is very, very important. The problem comes when you're hyperinsulinemic, when you have chronically elevated insulin levels for decades and decades and decades, and this completely throws off our biochemistry. So when I took biochemistry in my undergraduate degree, which is not everyone does, but in America this is a prerequisite for medical school. Senior level, in your final year of university, full year of biochemistry, you go into quite a lot of detail about the metabolism. And when you're eating carbohydrates, your insulin goes up. And this changes how your biochemistry works and functions in every single cell in your body severely. It's a very different system. And when you stop eating carbohydrates and your insulin comes down to a more, what I think of as a normal level, all of your biochemistry just switches. So insulin blocks lipolysis, blocks proteolysis. So you have fat on your body, you cannot access it if your insulin is up. Yeah. So you have to keep eating carbs. This is where the idea is that you have to eat carbs to burn carbs. Well, we know in every biochemistry textbook that you stop eating carbohydrates for 24 hours and you'll start making carbs. You'll start mobilizing your fat stores and making, through gluconeogenesis, blood sugar, liver glycogen, muscle glycogen, ketones, and your body perfectly runs on this. You also start triggering these longevity genes that, like people like Dr. David Sinclair talks about.
Sirtuins.
Yeah, exactly. That come on when you start fasting and things like that. Well, they actually just come on when you're in that
Ketosis.
So-called fasting state, which I don't think is our fasting state. I think that's where that's our primary metabolic state, and that's where all of our heavy machinery comes to bear. And we talk about all these amazing benefits of fasting, how good this is. Well, you can just always get those benefits at all times if you're just not eating carbs, basically, but also just eating meat. You're turning on these sirtuins and other sorts of things, and you're triggering autophagy and replacement of different older cells and older organelles and older mitochondria, and stimulating stem cells, and you just really slow down and curtail the aging process completely. So insulin disrupts all of that. Mm-hmm. It really messes that up, and we call that a fed state when you're eating carbohydrates. But I think of it as more of a pathological defense mechanism. High blood sugar is directly damaging. That causes damage to your body. Those glucose molecules physically fuse to other molecules. That's called glycation. And that's a non-enzymatic binding of that carbohydrate to another molecule. And so that's where you check your HbA1c and you notice, well, this is how many hemoglobin molecules have been damaged by glucose. And you have other carbohydrates will actually cause different products as well. So this is specifically glucose, is HbA1c. And so that causes damage, and your body sees this, and your blood sugar is going way up, and it goes, sweet Jesus, what has this idiot done? And it slams up your insulin to try to protect you. So I think that's a protective mechanism. And so they say, like, well, I think that the only reason we call that a fed state and the other a fasting state is by the time we were able to look at our biochemistry at a molecular level, everyone was eating carbohydrates. And they said, oh, when you eat, it looks like this. When you don't eat, it looks like that. Not realizing that if you eat anything else except from carbohydrates, it also looks like you're in a so-called fasting state. So if I eat a kilo of ribeye, 4,000 calories of meat and fat, I'm not fasting. And so that is not a fasting metabolism. That's just misnamed. And so, I think that that it's not insulin existing that's a problem. You have to have insulin. Insulin is extremely important for a lot of different things. It's just too much, completely derails your metabolism and just shuts down all of these very important biochemical processes, and actually stops you from producing enough ketones, which are very important. That's your brain's primary energy source. When you don't have enough ketones, your brain has to start running on glucose, but it will always run on the ketones available. If you have any ketones in your system, your brain is running on it. Mm-hmm. And if you raise your ketones by giving yourself like exogenous ketones or something like that, it goes up. Even if you have really high blood sugar, your brain will kick out all the blood sugar and only run on ketones. So that means there's a preference. It preferentially runs on ketones. And that's actually what I was taught in biochemistry 23 years ago. And for some reason, people are saying, no, you have to eat carbs because your brain runs on carb. Your brain's primary energy source is carbs. Like, well, first of all, no, it's not. And second of all, you make carbs. So even if it were, you would make enough of it anyway.
Yeah, super interesting about the brain preferring ketones. I hadn't heard that before. So then I guess some people might make the argument, well, okay, so if it's chronically high insulin, could you just fast and then eat carbs every now and then? Because I think it's Paul Saladino. I'm sure you probably get bored of hearing about him. He's like that one case study who eats fruit. But he says that he thinks there's benefits to having like a large, I guess, spike, but as long as it comes down quickly, he says that's not really a concern to him.
Well, certain things are better and worse, and I certainly agree that, it's better to have one big spike and then get over it than to have a bunch of spikes and just chronically maintain an elevated insulin level. I agree with that. And this is where like intermittent fasting comes in, where people say, I'm going to eat in this eating window, and they eat whatever the hell they want, but they only eat at a certain time, or they maybe eat just one meal a day, and they feel much better. Was a guy, Terry Crews. He's an actor, big dude who's on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He played like professional football, and he's just ripped. The guy's like in his 50s, like late 50s, but he's just shredded. I mean, he's like, has a physique of a bodybuilder. And he talks about intermittent fasting like it was just a game changer. He's like, it was made it a lot easier to keep on muscle and stay lean. And that's, I think that's the main benefits of that is simply waiting out the clock on insulin. And so you eat a bunch of whatever you eat, your insulin goes up, but then it slowly comes down. And like I said, it takes around 24 hours for it to come down. But that's what's taught in the textbooks, in biochemistry textbooks. But it is getting low enough at a certain point that you're going to start kicking on these different sort of processes. And generally, people that do intermittent fasting, they like don't eat like 1 day a week. And that's generally when these people would be like endurance athletes. That's usually the day that they run their marathons or do an Ironman or something like that, is on that fasting day. And that's when your insulin is lowest. And that's when your body is mobilizing your fat stores and making blood sugar, making glycogen, making ketones. And you can just go. You don't need to carbo load. In fact, it's counterproductive because you're shutting down your body's ability to mobilize your energy stores. I noticed that as a high level athlete myself, I never felt better. I couldn't run out of energy. I never hit the wall. I never gassed out ever. And so I noticed that directly myself. I understand it biochemically as well. And I know a lot of other endurance athletes, rugby players, and others. I just interviewed a guy, Sean, Sikowski, I think is how you pronounce his surname. But he's a South African cyclist. He's 50 years old. He's turning 51 in the next couple months. And he does these ultra endurance cycling events where he's going for 6-8 hours of just hard, which I think burning like 1,000 calories an hour, which is like Tour de France level, right, at 50. Wow. And he does them fasted. He never eats, and he does mostly carnivore, maybe like a bit keto, but he says he always feels the best when he does pure carnivore, and he never eats. He doesn't refuel. A lot of these guys are just sucking down, sugar packets and sugar gels and things like that. And oh my God, they're just crashing. They're crashing because their blood sugar's dropping. It's dangerous. And they're just thrashing their bodies. He doesn't refeed. He doesn't eat anything. He just boom goes at 1,000 calories an hour, 6 hours straight at one point. Right?
He's burning the fat, and the fat's on his body, right? So he doesn't have to switch.
That's exactly right. And so if you do that, if you don't eat carbohydrates, you're always in that state where you can burn these calories or just burn your fat. So, look, Dr. Saladino, who I've got a lot of respect for it. Like, he eats an extremely good diet as compared to the rest of the world. He's eating a buttload of meat that's like really healthy and nutritious, and he's having some fruit and honey and things like that. In the grand scheme of things, he's doing better than 99.9999% of people out there, And so, and he works out all the time, and he goes surfing, and he has a lot of outdoor recreation. He's grounding, he's walking around barefoot, he's in the sun, like he's living a very healthy life. And so, I'm not surprised that he has these good results. I think that he would be better off if he didn't eat that stuff. I certainly feel better without that stuff. I have a lot of patients and people that I've counseled, literally thousands at this point, who have tried the fruit and honey sort of thing, and it really didn't work for them. They had some serious health issues because of it, and a lot of people come to this because they've had food addiction problems, and even though they've lost the weight, they've reversed the diseases, they've come off the medication, they start eating these carbs, eating these sugars, especially fructose. Fructose is an addictive substance. It is a drug, and it gives an addiction. It plays in the addiction centers of your brain. So it gives a dopamine hit to the addiction centers of your brain, and it kills the same areas of your brain as these other major drugs, such as cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines. There's actually MRI studies that Dr. Lustig has presented on before in some of his talks, showing that if you give like someone like you or I, like an amphetamine, these certain areas of our brain will just light up like a Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. You give that same dose of amphetamine to a meth addict, and it barely lights up, just barely twinkles. You give that same dose to a sugar addict, someone who's metabolically sick from eating a bunch of sugar, it's the same barely twinkle. So it kills the same areas of the brain as meth to the same extent as meth. And that's a problem. And so and it also damages your body in the same way as alcohol, because fructose is broken down into the same byproducts as alcohol is. So you get the same damage to your body from fructose as you do alcohol. You get fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, heart disease, even implicating cancer and Alzheimer's, right? So this is damaging your body like alcohol, and it's damaging your brain, and at least in part, like meth. And so it's a very, very bad drug. It's extraordinarily addictive. And so when you get these people who have had problems with sugar addiction in the past, and they get a free pass on fruit and honey, well, a little bit of an addictive substance can easily turn into a lot of an addictive substance fairly quickly. And I've seen many people really fall off the rails and start eating more and more sugar, more fruit, more honey, and then it just becomes sugar and sodas and pizza. And 6 months later, they put on 40 pounds and their diabetes is back and all these things. Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab podcast, like really interesting guy. He actually reached out to me a while ago saying, "Hey, I'm gonna try the carnivore diet. I'm gonna do labs and do all these sorts of things." I was like, "Great, would love to help." We didn't end up, linking up, unfortunately, but he did end up trying the diet. After a couple of weeks, he was like, he felt great overall, and this was his recollection of this on Joe Rogan's podcast that I saw, and he was saying that he actually felt really good, but he didn't have the same energy in the workouts, and that was something important to him, was lifting weights and working out, and that was a big part of his happiness in his life. And so he wasn't really getting that hit in the gym that he normally did. Well, there's reasons for that. You don't get fat adapted, often for maybe 2-3 weeks. You may not be eating enough fat in particular. Most people don't. If you eat during the day, most people are like, well, I got to eat 3 times a day. You eat during the day, a big fatty meal, you will be lethargic and you will not have a good workout. I don't have good workouts when I eat before I go to the gym, even within a few hours before going to the gym. And so there's a lot of these things. So he wasn't having, the best results in the gym. He wasn't feeling his best, but it was still only a few weeks into it, or a couple weeks into it. And he spoke with Dr. Saladino, said, "Hey, I'm thinking about maybe reincorporating simple carbs for my workouts. What do you think?" And, he said what he thought was a good idea, which was, fruit and honey. And so he started doing that. And he said that it actually made him feel worse. And on top of that, it made him start, eating this stuff up and eating more of it, and started having that sort of addictive nature to the food that he was eating. And so, he was just like, yeah, I felt way worse. I didn't have as good of energy. It made my energy worse, if anything. If I'm not misremembering him, I don't want to misquote him, but that was my understanding of it. And either way, it wasn't a good outcome. And he started eating more and more. And that is what I see often. Some people like some people can just maybe have some fruit every now and then, more power to them. I don't care to, because I don't think it's adding anything to my life. And, but if someone wants to, go for it. But some of these people have this, addictive personality and had that history of addiction with sugar in particular. And when you start reincorporating that, you can absolutely go off track quite quickly. And I've seen a lot of people do that, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. Are you good to keep going? I want to respect your time.
No, happy to, man. Yeah, as long as you want.
Sure. I just want to ask about the fat adaptation, because I want to properly understand this. So you've got glycogen from eating carbs, right? You burn through all of that. Then does your body start making glucose through gluconeogenesis? And then only after a while it realizes we've got no carbs coming in. Now we're going to start burning fat. Is that how it works?
So when you're depending on the metabolic state you're in, it all sort of works differently. Like if you're eating carbohydrates and your insulin's up, you're going to only be able to run on your glycogen and your blood sugar only. You'll have some ketones around, but pretty much that's all you're going to have. And but that'll run out in about 2 hours, of hard exercise, heavy exercise. You're going to run out, even if you're carbo loading as much as you can. This is why marathon runners, they say they carbo load. They're just eating 13 pounds of pasta the night before. They go and they run a marathon. After 2 hours, they hit the wall. And that's what they talk about. the wall and they're shattered and they just feel horrible. And then, a lot of people will just take all those, just start pounding Gatorade or taking these sugary drinks or refeeding or whatever. But if you talk to people and you don't do that, and I've experienced this myself, as an athlete before going carnivore, in my teenage years, is that if you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, you can actually break through the wall, and you'll get your second wind and your runner's high. This is what people talk about, a runner's high. Well, I just feel amazing. I just want to keep going. I don't want to stop running. Most people are like, well, I don't want to start running. And they're like, I don't want to stop running. And that's what they get. So they break through the wall and they feel amazing. Well, what that is biochemically is you just have your glycogen. You can't make it. You blocked lipolysis, you blocked proteolysis. And so whatever your blood sugar is, whatever your glycogen is, it's not going up from there. And so it's just coming down until you run out. Now your blood sugar is going low. You can't raise it and you ran out of glycogen. And so you feel like garbage, and you really feel like garbage. Most of the time it takes about 24 hours for your insulin to come down low enough. But if you push yourself and push yourself and push yourself, you actually force yourself into a state where you can actually start mobilizing your energy stores. You can mobilize it. And then you start through gluconeogenesis, you start making blood sugar and liver glycogen and muscle glycogen and ketones, and you just feel amazing, and you just go, because the harder you work, the more energy you need to produce, the better you feel, because we feel better when we burn more energy. This is why stimulants make us feel good, because we're burning more energy and we feel great. Well, I live in my second wind. I am always in a runner's high. If I start working out, I'm always just producing the amount of energy that I need to work out. If I'm sitting here and talking to you, I'm producing the exact amount of energy I need to sit here and talk to you. I go work out, I start running, I start lifting weights, I start mobilizing energy I need for whatever I'm doing. It'll match whatever I'm doing, and I feel amazing. Most people take a bunch of stimulants and down sugar and caffeine and whatever before they work out to boom, give them that big hit so that they can work out. I go work out so that I can feel like that. I don't take any of that pre-workout nonsense.
Yeah.
And so that's what's happening. If you're not eating carbohydrates, if you're on a carnivore diet or even a keto diet, some lectins, even if you're not eating carbohydrates, but you're eating plants that have lectins in it, some of these lectins can actually bind to your insulin receptors and actually cause a stronger insulin response than insulin. And so you have to be mindful of that. So carnivore is really, better. It's not just keto. So if you're in that state, and you're just eating carnivore, then you have access to your fat stores. Your blood sugar is here. Your glycogen is here. It really doesn't fluctuate. And we have studies in this in humans. We also have studies of this in wolves going back to 1981. Where this was back when they said you have to eat carbs in order to burn carbs. They said, well, what about wolves? Like wolves don't carbo load before they chase caribou for 10 hours. They just go. And so they checked, like, do they even have blood sugar? Do they even have glycogen? And I found yes, they do, and it's rock solid. It just does not budge. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It doesn't matter if they're in the middle of a hunt, after they eat, but whatever. It's here. It's always here. Because they're using it and replenishing it just, as they go, right? And so, that's what we have, we're capable of as well. You can really work and go as hard as you can. You can burn through your body's glycogen, need to rest for a little bit, and your body's going to catch up a bit and whatever, and replace your oxygen debt and so on. And then eventually you're going to be like, okay, I feel better. I'm going to go again. And that's what's happening there. But you can keep doing it, and you can go at a pace that you are just replacing your glycogen as you burn it, and you can actually, as you're doing that more and more and more, then you can actually increase your body's demand, and your body will respond up into a point. So that's how it is. So if you're eating carbohydrates, you're not making anything. You're only running on the glycogen that you have in store, and then you have to eat to replace that, or you have to wait it out. But if you're not eating any of that garbage, then you're constantly replenishing your glucose and blood sugar, and ketones.
Yeah, because people talk about the Randall cycle, and I was kind of wondering, well, is it just if you keep eating? Because if you don't if your body's like, we need more carbs, but you don't eat, like, you're not just going to die. It's going to have to switch, right? So it does start making then, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it seems to. I mean, that, and so I've never seen any, any actual, like, biochemistry or anything like that showing exactly what happens. But that's the only thing that what makes sense to me. I mean, that's the thing that fits the observed phenomena. And because you get to a point and you're running out of glycogen, blood sugar, and like you're going to pass out and die. And so you need to, something has to happen. And maybe not everyone's capable of that. Maybe that's the difference between someone who can run a marathon and someone who just goes like, yep, nope, I'm done with this crap, and maybe it's those people that are able to sort of push through the wall and change their biochemistry. But either way, it's not necessary to worry about that at all, as long as you're not eating carbohydrates. You're not eating carbohydrates, your biochemistry will work much better. You'll be much healthier in general, and you'll have a much higher exercise tolerance as well.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to bring it back to like the fruit thing with people commonly say, oh, I need carbs because of electrolytes. I heard something to do with taurine can help with, which is taurine is in, usually when you cook meat, it's normally in the juices, right? And that can help with electrolytes. So, why do you think people seem to have these electrolyte problems?
Well, I'm not too sure about the taurine side of things, but the idea with the carbohydrates is that you actually need a certain amount of insulin to to pull back in some of these electrolytes at the level of the kidney in the microtubules there. But you do have insulin. Like, your insulin isn't zero. And so, your body is very, very capable of adapting to different situations. And so, just like you drink alcohol a lot, you're going to build up your body's tolerance towards alcohol or any other sort of substance. And so, if you have just chronically high insulin, your body, and that's changing how your body is able to balance out your electrolytes with your urine and your blood serum. It's going to adapt to that, and it's going to have a workaround so that you don't die. Like, if your sodium level goes too high or too low, it affects your brain. You get very, very confused, very lethargic, very drowsy, and then you have seizures and you die. If your potassium gets out of whack, you generally get heart issues. And so you'll get heart arrhythmias, such as atrial fibrillation, which is a very, very fast, rapid, irregular beat. And then that turns into ventricular fibrillation, which is a cardiac arrest, and you die, right? So it's a very serious thing. So your body has to be able to adapt. So, when you're a baby and you're breastfeeding, even though there's carbohydrates in milk, those kids are in ketosis. Their metabolic state is one of ketosis. And so that, again, is further evidence that this is our natural state, right? You're saying that, people say, well, there's a starvation state and it stresses your system and your cortisol is all crazy and all. It's complete and utter nonsense. Basically, all animals in the wild, they're in that so-called starvation state and stressed and horrible. No, absolutely not. Babies, for 2 years of their life are in ketosis every day of their life. Okay. So this is an abnormal stress state where we're just going to, no, this is normal. This is what we're supposed to be in, at least for a lot of the time. And so going back into that and just allowing your blood sugar to get back to normal, letting your insulin get back to normal, your body's going to adjust again, and you're going to be able. Maybe you have like a couple of days where maybe some electrolytes are slipping out, but your body is so good at correcting these things because it has to be, because you die otherwise. And so, I've found that first of all, I've never seen a diagnosed case of electrolyte deficiency in someone going carnivore ever. And I've had hundreds of patients, and we check their bloods. And generally people say, oh, I'm having electrolyte disturbances. And you say, how do you know? And so, well, I'm having symptoms of electrolyte disturbances. What are they? And are they confusion, drowsiness, atrial fibrillation? No, I just don't feel right.
Water.
Or I'm having leg cramps. I'm like, those are not the symptoms of low electrolytes. And so I think that sometimes people are calling something, electrolyte issues that maybe aren't. And a lot of times people then they're adding salt to their water. They're just over salting things. They're taking all these electrolytes. They're told you have to take electrolytes. You don't have to take electrolytes. Maybe some people do early on, but the vast majority of people don't. I've yet to see someone in practice who's actually had an electrolyte issue. I tell people you don't need to take electrolytes. You don't need to do this sort of stuff. If there's a problem, we talk about it. We get some bloods. We check it out. I have yet to see anyone with electrolyte disturbances, and so a lot of people will be taking these things. We have nursery rhymes that talk about the dangers of drinking salted water, right? You're talking about the ocean, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. Like, you drink this, you're dead. Like, it's not good for you. You end up becoming more dehydrated. And so I think that's more of an issue, is that people say, well, I'm getting leg cramps, I'm getting these problems with electrolyte issues, but I'm taking all these electrolytes, I'm taking all this salt, I'm drinking basically, like brackish seawater. And they're like, oh, I'm still having this problem. I was like, well, okay, well, that's clearly not the electrolytes then, is it? Because you're taking electrolytes and you're using a stupid amount of salt. So, that's covered. And you're still having the problem. That means it's something else. Something else is going on, right? And quite a lot of the times, it's actually dehydration. And most people are not drinking enough water. The majority of people are not drinking enough water. And then when you're adding in tons and tons and tons of electrolytes, and a lot of salt, you actually increase your body's demand for water as well, because now you have to get rid of this stuff. And yeah, you are peeing out more of this stuff because you're eating more of this stuff. And now you're getting too dehydrated. And so I find that most of these people have, especially with like leg cramps and things like that, it's mostly dehydration. They're not drinking enough water. And if you think you're having a problem and it's due to electrolytes, get it checked. It's very easy. It's like one of the easiest, most simple blood tests that you can get. It's available basically anywhere, and you can just check. And if you check and you say, oh yeah, plumb normal, it's not that, you can look at other options. But that's the idea behind the electrolytes.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. It's not actually, you don't think, an electrolyte issue.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure there are people who have had electrolyte issues for those reasons, right? Or other reasons. You can have other things that disrupt your electrolytes. It's very rare, even in the hospital setting, that we see people with electrolyte disturbances, and they give very, very specific, marked symptoms that are not leg cramps. Magnesium can cause leg cramps, absolutely. Low calcium can cause leg cramps, absolutely. And we have someone who's having cramps, they can't get rid of the cramps. We test their magnesium and their calcium. We don't care about the sodium and the potassium. And when we have people with low sodium and low potassium, I have yet to see someone who had in the hospital with low potassium or sodium who is having cramps of any description. It's not to say that they can't or won't, but I haven't seen it. And so, I'm less convinced of that being a marker of potassium being in the normal range, but just on the low end of normal range. I don't know. I just don't really buy that. And, but I'm sure there are people who have had electrolyte issues. And I think that if anyone's having, weird time and they're concerned about it, it is a good idea to check it. And if you have low potassium or you have low sodium, sure, add a bit more salt in, or try to figure out, maybe is there something else that's contributing to this, because there can be very serious health issues that can be associated with electrolyte disturbances, or can cause electrolyte disturbances. So I just don't think people should just haphazardly just take a bunch of electrolytes. Just get it checked if you're worried about it. But most of the time, I see people that are having like leg cramps in particular, it's more of a dehydration issue than an electrolyte issue.
Yeah, saying there that electrolytes maybe aren't super essential. Another thing I want to ask about is liver and eggs. So Michaela Peterson, she had low folate just from doing muscle meat, salt and water, and I know that liver and eggs are also often included in a carnivore diet. Do you think you need something like that to maybe plug a few of the holes? Is muscle meat just enough?
Depends on the person and depends on the muscle meat. I was just going to say quickly, as far as the electrolytes are concerned, especially with cramps, a lot of people when they go on a carnivore diet aren't doing it like I do, which is 100% meat and water. Most people drink coffee in this world.
Yes.
Most people going carnivore continue to drink coffee. Coffee is a plant. Coffee has lectins. Coffee has tannins. Coffee has all these phytic acid, all these different sorts of anti-nutrients. And some of those anti-nutrients bind magnesium, strip it out of your body, and also dehydrates you. So caffeine can dehydrate you. The coffee can strip your magnesium. Perfect storm for muscle cramps. And so maybe not take as many, supplements. Maybe just get rid of the caffeine in the coffee, and maybe give yourself some magnesium or something like that if you have to catch yourself back up. But that's just a thought, and that's something that you do see as well.
Because you eat eggs, right? With your, I know Sean Baker does. A lot of people do.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. I personally don't have a problem with eggs. Some people do have a problem with eggs, especially egg whites. People with autoimmune issues seem to have more of a problem with the egg whites, but even pork and chicken and things like that. I think it has more to do with how the animal was raised and what they were fed. A lot of them are giving soy pellets and garbage like that, which they are not supposed to eat either. So they're not going to be able to detoxify it all the way, and so they're not going to be as healthy as they can be, which means that they're not going to be as healthy for us. To that end, to that extent, different animals raised in different ways have different nutritional components. And so if you have animals that are grass-fed and finished or regeneratively raised, on these lands where they're moved around for different paddocks, it's very labor intensive. It takes time to do this, but you get so much more out of it. It makes your land so much more healthy. You're putting all these nutrients back in the ground. The ground is more fertile and more nutrient dense, which makes the grass more nutrient dense, which makes the animals more nutrient dense. And every generation of animal contributes to this and just makes everything better and better and better. And so specifically for folate, I remember seeing a regenerative farmer who was giving a speech at, I believe, Hillsdale College, and he was talking about this. He was talking, hey, this is something that actually makes a big difference. And he was talking about just the nutritional component content of these things. I think he was talking about, I think he said that the folate of a normal egg is like something like 41 milligrams or something like that in the US. Whereas his eggs, regeneratively on this regenerative farm, had over 1,000, right?
What? That's insane.
Yeah, exactly. So the meat is going to be different. And I've spoken to a number of different ranchers that do regenerative farming and things like that. And they get their meat tested, and they get these things tested for different nutritional components, and they find that they have triple, quadruple, or more times the amount of various micronutrients in their meat. And one guy was saying that it's like if you tested like their meat. You're talking about the RDAs, like the recommended daily allowances, which first of all was created by Ansel Keys, the guy who's paid off by the sugar companies to do all this other nonsense. So I don't know. Do you trust anything that guy has ever done? I don't, because you don't know what it was bought off and why. And so if you look at that, what this guy was saying was just like with their sort of regeneratively raised sort of animals, like they say that, well, you can't just eat meat because you're not going to get all these micronutrients. Well, first of all, that's not true. You don't necessarily need as many as all that if you're only eating an animal diet, if you're not eating carbs and plants and things like that. What they were saying is like their meat actually covered all the RDAs, and so it was just like, yeah, actually, even if you're looking at that as a metric, it wouldn't be deficient. And so, I eat store-bought meat, and I just eat muscle meat. I have some eggs every now and then. My bloods are excellent. I actually converted a number of doctors that I work with based on my bloods, and they're endocrinologists and functional medicine looked at my bloods, and he said that for my age, if you took 100,000 people off the street that were my age, that my bloods would be number one without a shadow of a doubt. Wow. And he was just like, all right, I want to know more about this. And so we ended up getting into it and talking about it. Now he recommends this to his patients. He puts all his patients on a carnivore diet as well. So, for me, it's not an issue, right? People are going to metabolize things slightly differently. It may be that, Michaela and I eating the same thing, she might have a bit of a deficiency in folate, I might not, or it might be that, what she's eating maybe doesn't have quite as much folate as the things I'm eating. I don't know. But, there is more folate in liver and in eggs as well. And so, if you find yourself in that category that, maybe you're not as nutrient rich as you could be or should be, just add in some liver. That's totally fine. I have no problem with that. I think that the problem comes when people think you have to have liver and you need a lot of it, or you need a ton of it. Like, the only reason that we're eating so much liver is because we simply have access to so much liver, because we can go to a butcher and no one else is eating the liver. So there's abundance of liver available. And the problem with that is that it is very nutrient dense. And, this is why the Inuit, Eskimos don't eat the organs, because they're too nutrient dense, and you can actually get toxicities. You can get hypervitaminosis, which are toxic levels of these vitamins, and specifically the fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A. Yes. They stay around for a long time. They don't really go away. They're hard to get rid of. They're hard to clear. You don't just you take too much B vitamins or something like that. You'll pee out most of it. That's why your pee turns fluorescent green when you take a multivitamin with B in it, or fluorescent sort of yellow sort of thing. But anyways, there's this very distinct color to it, and you can't do that with vitamin A.
Especially the polar bears. I think a cow has about 400 IUs. That might be wrong. Of vitamin A, but polar bear liver has got like 10,000. It's like way higher.
Yeah, so it's enough to kill you anyway, and so it's you don't eat them, and even if you're eating a cow liver, right? Let's say, but let's take this back to our roots, right? We don't have butcher shops available. We don't have freezers and refrigerators available. You go hunt, you take down an animal, you're eating what's on that animal, and you're eating it before it spoils, right? And so, or you're preserving it, drying it, and things like that.
Pretty nice.
Yeah.
If you're in the Arctic.
Well, yeah, and or you're making pemmican. If the Native Americans and things like that, they dry the meat, they crush it up, they mix it with rendered fat, the tallow, and they would pack that together, and that would be like 80% calories from fat, and that's what they eat throughout the year. So they'd have like a buffalo drop. They'd chase a herd of buffalo over a cliff, and thousands of these things would fall and die, and they'd harvest all of these carcasses and turn them into pemmican, and they would eat that throughout the year, but however you're going to do it, each animal has one liver, right? And so you as an individual, let's say you just lived out in the woods somewhere, and you hunted to survive, and you took down a moose, right? That moose would have enough meat on it to feed you as an individual for like at least 2 years easily, right? And it has one liver in that 2 years, right? So how much liver are you actually eating?
I mean, their livers are pretty big, but yeah, if you break it down like that, I think.
But it's still a big liver over the course of 2 years, right? So it's 700 days or thereabouts, right? That you're eating this liver. So it's going to be a small amount on a daily basis. You're going to eat it at all. And so, when people are eating like 500 grams of liver a day, they think, wow, liver's so good for me. I think that can be problematic. And I think you just run the risk of things like hypervitaminosis A. And there's some of these people that do eat a lot of the liver, and they say, well, I can't do carnivore because I got low thyroid and low testosterone. Well, one of the known side effects of hypervitaminosis A is suppressing your thyroid stimulating hormone, which is going to suppress the secretion of thyroid hormone, which is going to drop your metabolism, which is going to make you feel like garbage. And and so I'm not actually all that surprised that's happening. It's a lot of the people, famously, like, Dr. Saladino. I mean, he really thinks that organs are really important. I think they're important too. I just think that they're important in proportion of the animal, and especially if you're coming from like a mixed diet or a vegan diet, or and you're nutritionally deficient, liver's your best friend, and you should definitely get all over that. But I think that once you get to a point that most people can maintain all of their nutrients just on skeletal muscle, meat, and fat, maybe a bit of liver every now and then, for the folate and other sorts of things. So I'm totally fine with that. But, I don't think that you see a lot of this stuff. Dr. Saladino and others, did, Carnivore Aurelius and was it Frank Tofano, they all really, really, really really were advocates for eating a lot of liver in particular. They were the ones that famously and visibly had these issues. I'm sure other people had issues as well, but they were also the ones that were eating a ton of these organs. And when you eat carbohydrates, it raises your body's demand for basically all vitamins and minerals. So you just need more of them. This is also why the RDAs are probably very inaccurate for someone on a keto or carnivore diet, because you're just getting rid of carbohydrates, you just need less vitamins and minerals. And so, it could be that they're now raising their body's demand for vitamin A, and now they're just sort of around where they need to be, and they feel much better, and their hormones are improving and things like that. But my thyroid's fine. All my patients' thyroids actually improve. They get better on a carnivore diet. I have a number of patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and they get better, not worse. And their hormones get better. Their testosterone gets better. I have a number of men on this. A guy who's a professional rugby player, and his testosterone levels nearly tripled on a carnivore diet. And he was like, I'm never stopping this. Like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And even elderly men in their 60s and 70s going on a carnivore diet, I see that within 3 months their testosterone levels, without any sort of supplementation or replacement therapy, will routinely go up 30-40%, just as a baseline. One gentleman, he was in his 70s, he it always cracks me up. His went up, it's like over doubled. His testosterone levels were back to that of a 25-year-old. And he was just bouncing. He was just like, I feel amazing. Like, all I want to do is work out and have sex with my wife. Like, it's just awesome. I feel like a teenager again. It was very good to see. And he was extremely happy, and had just a new lease on life. And so, I don't see that, and I don't harp on organs. I always tell people to be very cautious with them. That organs are fine, but just do it in moderation. Understand that this is part of a whole animal, and you're going to get hundreds of pounds of skeletal muscle, meat, and fat for every 1 pound of liver. And so keep it in that proportion, at least when you're in a maintenance phase and you're not deficient in anything. So, and then I think, and then Frank Tofano, I think, had other sort of confounding issues. He was on Accutane, or Roaccutane, which is actually, a vitamin A sort of analog. And so that's going to like really overdo this. I mean, this stuff is super, super toxic. I mean, it's for acne, and it is absolute poison. It is just toxic stuff. And so, he was having health issues, but this was at the time he was taking that stuff. And so, I think there might have been, other things going on as well. I don't know. I mean, I'm not his doctor, but I mean, this is just from him relaying his issues. He's had, that was something that was going on concurrently. So, but it's not something that I've seen. It's not something that I've seen in practice. It's not something I've seen in myself. And I'm not seeing this on the labs of my patients. Their hormones are getting better. Their electrolytes are staying the same, and they're doing very, very well.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It's like, people are going to be a little bit different, and you should just do the blood tests. If you don't know how to interpret them, get someone to help you interpret them, and then go from there. And like you said, you don't think you really need to be eating liver every day. I think Paul Saladino has pulled it back a bit, to be fair to him. I think he says about like 1 to 2 ounces a day, which is like 30 to 60 grams, which is
that's good.
Sounds more reasonable. Whereas you've got people like Liver King eating like 500 grams a day. It's just like crazy. Yeah, that's way too much. Yeah.
And now he's eating like 9 bull testicles a day or something like that. I'm like, I would, but all right.
Don't want to lose his gains.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, you never know. I mean, I have trouble with that, just because, I mean, he's sort of, put this out there before and tried to sort of say, this is how I'm doing it. Is this a cover for him to just continue to do the same thing, but say, oh, no, it's because I'm eating 10 bull testicles a day. And so that's why I'm able to maintain this. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the guy. I don't have any ill will towards him. But I don't like the fact that he was dishonest with people, and I don't like the fact that he by doing that, he sort of muddied the meat-based
Yes.
diet
Yeah.
name and carnivore name, even though he was never carnivore. Dude drank maple syrup. I'm like, no, that's absolutely not. I mean, you can't even say that that's from bees. Oh, that's animal. If that's from an animal, I mean, is this from a tree? You're getting condensed tree sap. So it's like, no, like absolutely not. No, that's just you're just feeding your addiction at that point. It is addictive. It's a very addictive substance, and I think that when you're drinking maple syrup, you have to ask yourself, do you have a problem?
Yeah. I think Michaela Peterson also pointed that out. Like, this is actually bad for the carnivore diet, with people saying this.
Yeah.
I think it was Lane Norton was saying that the testosterone that is in testicles is like really orally is really not very bioavailable at all. It's only like 3% or something. So either you're gonna have to eat tons of it, and that's gonna hurt your liver, I think he said, or it's just doing nothing. So yeah, it's slightly suspicious.
It's probably doing nothing, but so that's why I sort of wonder, is this sort of a screen? And he's just going to keep doing what he was doing before, And the thing is too is that, like, even if he was going to be doing these things, like he wasn't having the gains that he wanted. Well, he was eating a buttload of sugar, and when your insulin goes up, you eat sugar, your insulin goes up. You actually block your body's ability to secrete growth hormone and to utilize growth hormone. And he was saying that he had to take like the guy who played for more dates was saying like the amount of growth hormone he was taking was like way more than like people going for like Mr. Universe was taking. You know what I mean? Like insane amounts, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm not getting my my GF1 up. I'm not getting this marker of the functionality of growth hormone. You're drinking sugar. Your insulin is up all the time. This is why you don't eat. When you're eating carbs and crap like that, you don't eat at night, because you get this insulin spike, and your biggest dose of growth hormone a day is 2 hours after you go to sleep. And so if you have an insulin spike at that time, it blocks that growth hormone spike. And what growth hormone does slip through is not really bioactive to the same degree. And so, the last thing you want to do if you're a bodybuilder or an athlete and you want to maximize your own natural hormones or even exogenous hormones, you do not want to eat sugar. You do not want to eat carbs. You do not want to have your insulin up.
Wow, I've not heard that about the interrupting growth hormone. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it was a different podcast. One of their thumbnail was something like, how it was. I think it was you and your girlfriend or wife or
Girlfriend, yeah.
It was like how you kind of convinced her to be carnivore, almost. How? I mean, I'm not saying that I'm going to go around converting people, so you must eat meat, but like, how do you even get people to maybe open up to the discussion of maybe vegetables aren't as good as you think, maybe saturated fat and cholesterol aren't giving you heart disease? Like, do you have any ways to, even get people to talk about this stuff? Because some of it's so like sacrosanct, like, no, this is fact, you need fiber and all this stuff. It's like, how do you think you get people to think about it differently?
So it's well, usually they come to me, because they'll see how I'm eating, and they'll see what I'm doing. And when we would go out and things like that, just come up, we'd go to dinner or something like that on a date, and I'm just ordering like just the steak and I don't have anything else. I'm like, oh, you're not going to get anything else? It's like, no, I don't really eat that stuff. And it just naturally comes up in conversation, and so you talk about it. Usually, like someone else will bring it up. And they'll ask like, oh, you only eat meat? And I was like, yeah, I do. And it's just like, you're not having any vegetables, like no fruits? And I'll just make a little joke. It was just be like, yeah, they're super bad for you. Just say it like that. So it's a bit disarming. I'm not like attacking them or anything like that. I'm just saying to them, and they're like, wait, what? And it was just like, yeah, like, oh yeah, vegetables are just super bad for you. And then they'll just ask me, like, well, what are you talking about? And they'll say like, look, well, just biologically, humans are carnivores. Most people understand that. I mean, we teach that in school. I was taught that as a kid, that humans are apex predators, top of the food chain. That means you eat meat exclusively unless you're starving to death and you eat something else. No apex predator grazes. No apex predator eats an abundance of food, of plant food and things like that. dolphins don't, dolphins and sharks don't eat kelp for roughage. Lions don't eat grass. Like they eat meat. That's what they do. And that's what we did. And, and a lot of people, get that. I'm like, oh yeah, well, I mean, humans are carnivore. Yeah, we're hunters and hunter gatherer, blah, 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 apex predators. Like we get that because that is what the evidence shows. And that's what the evidence has always shown. I've never seen a cave painting of a salad, right? It's always hunting, taking down elephants and buffalo and things like that. So you point these things out, and I just make the case. I was just like, look, I think that humans biologically are carnivore. That's the best thing for us. And it actually turns out that plants are harmful. And I point out, I'll just point out the window and be like, can you eat any of those plants? Can you make a salad out of those bushes? Well, no, of course not. I'm like, well, why not? I was like, well, because it'll make you sick. Well, why do they make you sick? Well, they have stuff in them that are bad for you, right?
Bingo.
And you point out that that's how all plants defend themselves, and that animals, same thing as I said before, which is that all living things have natural defenses, and this is a plant's defense. And so if you think about it, all plants are poisonous. It's just that certain animals, have evolved to be able to eat certain plants. And you point that stuff out to people, and it's just it makes sense because A, it's true, and B, it's logically consistent. So you just sort of make those points. Not everybody wants to come over to the dark side right away, but I've actually had very good success, like sort of converting people, and quite a lot of people are talking about like vegans or vegetarians, something like that, and we'll get to talking. They're generally genuinely interested, because a lot of people go vegetarian or go vegan for very good reasons. They've been convinced that watching the Game Changers documentary, it's not a documentary, it's watching Game Changers
propaganda film
commercial for pea protein, because that's the thing. James Cameron was executive producer on the Game Changers. He's got made Terminator and Avatar. He owns $140 million worth of a pea protein company. So I mean, this is just one big commercial. Right? He's like, oh, you need protein, but not that yucky meat, but I just happen to have this thing right here. It's amazing, So I mean, it's just garbage. But but people are looking at that and go, wow, I want to be game changer, and I want to be all this super athlete, this super broccoli power. And I'm like, oh god, all right, and and so they do it because they think that that's the right thing to do. And they've just been lied to. They've been misled. And so when you point out to them, you show them the evidence, and they ask, well, what about cholesterol? Well, what about the nutrients? Well, what about fiber? And it's always the same things. And so you have the answers available for them. And I've got like literally hundreds of studies and papers and resources on my phone that I've just collected over the years. And I said, well, what about this? What about this? And it's like, here, there are 13 studies on that. There you go. And so you're able to do that. And then it's just, it's just through exposure. The more you're with someone, the more you're around people, the more they see that you really do this, and that you really are healthy, and that, you're able, that you're keeping a very strong, muscular, lean physique, and, working 20 hours a day, under grueling conditions or more, I mean, sometimes I'd have to work 36 hours, 48 hours, even 60 hours straight. I've done 64 hours straight before. I think I got about 2 hours of sleep twice during that period. And, and so it can be very busy. And the only reason I'm able to do that, and not go insane or just die is because of how I eat. And so the more people are around you, the more they sort of see what you're doing and how it has an effect. And, they ask questions, they get interested, and then they try it for themselves, and they see how much better it is. And, the rest is generally history. With Elle, my girlfriend, it was, she would come over to my house and we'd have dinner, and there are no plants in my house. Like, I don't even have potted plants. It's just like there's no plants.
So we have meat.
Potted plants, but I'm not. I'm certainly nothing to eat. And so when I'm cooking steak, and the good thing about cooking steak every single night and only eating steak every day is you get really good at cooking steak. It's like my steaks, like I swear I'll get a Michelin star rating on these things.
I've seen
like they are
YouTube
really
shorts. Good. Yeah, they look good.
Well, I have never been to a steakhouse that can do them better than me. Like, I'm just going to throw that out there. And like, I've been to a lot of, top steakhouses, and I'm always like, okay, how's it going to match up? And it's like, they're always really good, but they're never as good as the steaks I make at home. And we actually went out with the neurosurgical department. We all went out for at a big fancy steakhouse here in Perth, and but we had done steak nights at my house before, and we all barbecued up steaks. And I'd made them my special steaks. So I aged them in a certain way and dry brine them and things like that. And so I've done that several times for people, and every time they're eating them, they're like, "Oh my God, like you eat this every day? Like this is amazing, Like no wonder you don't eat steak. I don't eat this because this is all you eat." And we went to a restaurant, went to the steakhouse, and everyone had basically been there and had my steaks apart from one of the doctors there, and who had just joined back in the department a few months earlier, and so he asked, some of the other guys, like, "Oh, hey, so how does this steak, match up? Is this whose steak is better, like this one or Chaffee's steak?" And everyone was just like, "Oh, Chaffee's, absolutely. No, there's no doubt about it." It's like, no, Chaffee's, like no one beats Chaffee's steaks. Like
awesome.
those are just, yeah. So and so when you're when you're the one cooking, you get to control what gets cooked, and then it tastes good. And so, she was there eating that and going like, "This is the best damn steak I've ever had in my life." And I'm, yes, I know. And so, she's happy to eat that. When she was, off, on her own and things like that, she would eat whatever she ate. But, the more we hung out, the more she started eating that way. And it just through osmosis, she just sort of started getting more and more. And then at a point, she just said, "Okay, well, I'm just going to try this full on and see how I go." And she just like, she was like, "Wow, I feel so much better." And, so she's just doing a lot better with it. And so she just, doesn't really have any interest to go back. And that's often what you see. People see the results in you first, then they ask questions, and then they give it a try, and they're like, "Okay, yep, this is night and day. Like this is not a small difference. This is a major, massive difference. And like I don't want to not feel like this again."
Yeah, I mean that's great to hear. Yeah, I think the issue I sometimes run into is people, you can explain it to them, you said it all out, like, yeah, that makes sense. But like you said earlier, but vegetables are still good for you, right? Because it's just this amount of I guess, programming this, like, we've constantly been told, it's just drilled in, even if they can see the logic. But, it happens over time.
Yeah.
So with, like, what I guess is a bit of a pyramid in your head of like the levels of what foods you should cut out. So I imagine like seed oils and processed sugars are like around the bottom. Because I've heard you talk about dairy and it's sometimes okay and stuff. Like what would you cut out if someone is struggling? Like what are the first things to go?
Well, if they're just eating just a normal diet, what do you cut first?
Yeah.
No, I certainly think there is a hierarchy. I mean, first of all inedible plants. I mean, just don't eat those. Don't eat hemlock and things like that, right? So you're already down to edible plants. I think that any processed food, just straight off the bat, never touch any of that. Just only eat whole foods, and then take out all sugar and alcohol first, and very close second carbohydrates in general. So just getting rid of all carbs and sugar and all artificial sweeteners of any description, that needs to go. And so you need your body to be in its proper metabolic state. You need your insulin to be at lower levels. You need your stem cells working, your inflammatory system to be working properly. You need your metabolism functional.
So fruit as well in there. So fruit comes out 100%, before some vegetables, right?
Yeah, I think that's the first thing you do is like anything with sugar out the door, out the window. Anything with carbs out the door, out the window. That's just my view on it. And then after that, and just keep it simple. I mean, if you're keeping in this carb, but you're not doing that carb, well, maybe you have some honey, but not maple syrup. Okay, maybe even some maple syrup. All right, now a Twinkie. I mean, like where do you draw the line? So for me, it's just get rid of carbs and sugar. Like an apple every now and then, it's not going to kill you, right? But that can grow, and instead of just having this sort of fuzzy line where people don't know where to step, and say, well, you can have fruit sometimes. You don't have too much. I mean, what is too much? What is sometimes? What is that? Just keep it simple. Don't eat sugar. No sugar. No, just none. No sugar. No carbs. Get rid of it. After that, I would say you want to get rid of, as far as plants are concerned, you want to get rid of nightshades. So, potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, capsicums, those sorts of things. You want to get rid of those things. And then all sort of seeds, nuts, legumes, a
Beans.
seed. Yeah. So everything protects your babies more than anything, right? And a seed is a plant's baby. A bean is a seed. A nut is a seed. A legume. These are all seeds. And so this is where you generally find the highest concentration of these plant toxins, these defense chemicals. That's why you have to soak the hell out of beans and seed, of beans and legumes, and boil the crap out of them, is because you're trying to, take out these lectins, but you're not going to get all of them. And so, you need to sort of cut all those things out as well. And then if you have some veggies left over, that don't have sugar and things like that, you just want to focus on meat. You want to eat a lot of meat and fatty meat, and a lot more fat than you think, because 70% calories from fat is 50% fat by weight, right? So that's like 50-50 mince, right? That's 70% calories from fat, or like a fatty ribeye that has not been trimmed off, right? So it's a lot more fat than people are used to eating. And so it's, it can take some getting used to, but just really don't be afraid of fat. It's really hard to overeat fat. It's like people say, well, you don't want too much fat. That's not something that's really something you can do, because it's really just an oxymoron, because you can't absorb more than a certain amount of fat, right? So your body makes bile, and the bile is used to emulsify fat, and then you can absorb it. It's very difficult for your body to absorb fat. Otherwise, a very, very, very low percentage of fat gets in without bile. And so, your body wants a certain amount of fat. That's why it's made that bile. I just don't believe that your body's going to just make a random amount of bile to absorb a random amount of fat. That's insane to me, because your body is so exacting in every other respect. And so you could eat a bucket of lard and just scorf it down with a shovel, and your body would absorb what you have bile for, and the rest is just going to go out, and you're going to have horrible diarrhea the rest of the day, because it's going to be just all come out. But that's fine. You're not going to absorb it. So, you eat too much fat, you just get diarrhea. That's what too much fat is. But you can't eat too much fat as far as a nutritional absorption point of view, unless you do something silly like take ox bile or something like that. Then you're going to force your body to absorb even more fat than your body wants. So you eat a lot of fat, you're not going to really run into oh gosh, what if I eat too much? You'll get diarrhea. You'll know about it, and again, you're not absorbing really more than that. It's not bad for you. And so focusing on meat, making meat the meal. You can have some other things as garnish. I would avoid those other things first and foremost. And then if you're having some greens or having some veggies or having something, just mix them up. Don't eat the same thing every day. Because your body does have a capacity, but it's a limited capacity to detoxify some of these things. Some things it can't. Like your body really doesn't have the ability to detoxify things like oxalates, and you can't really cook them out or prepare them out or things like that. Your body has to clear them through, you have to pee them out or go through your skin or go through your tears, and you can get problems. You get serious problems with oxalates. You get, they're anti-nutrients. They can bind calcium and other minerals, and mineral salts, and they can form crystals, and so you can or they form crystals, I should say, and you can get kidney stones. So like calcium oxalate stones are a very common type of kidney stone. So you want to eat different things that have different toxins in them, and allow your body to sort of work through them and detoxify them, and then give something else the next time, and let your body repair from the stress that you caused it by eating whatever the hell it was you ate on Tuesday. And just focus on meat. I mean, meat is really the main thing. Just meat and water is the best way to go. If you can't quite get there, then I would sort of exclude those things and then just try to limit the others and mix them up. I think that's a very important thing to do if you're going to incorporate plants in your diet.
And then you also eggs, and like if you can tolerate it. And then I heard you say with dairy's got some good stuff in. It's obviously not going to be as defended, but it's got that carbs and fat together, so people like overeat on it quite easily. Because I can't remember who it was. It was someone, I think it was Paul Saladino, said it basically tells your brain like you're sucking on a boob, so keep doing that to get babies to survive.
Well, there's a very small amount of opiates in milk. So you can get a bit of an addiction. I want more of this sort of feeling. I mean, you're not going to get high off of it, but there is a small amount, and it's thought that that's probably why kind of like I want more of that. It's not just a hunger thing. It's like I need this stuff in my life sort of thing. But yeah, so milk will have carbohydrates, and that's enough. And there's enough lactose in milk to raise your insulin and kick you out of your primary metabolic system. And so, I think that should be avoided. Dairy's a bit of a gray area. I would just not drink milk really at all. Like it's like every now and then, like fine, but like full fat and like really just keep it to a glass and then do it like once every blue moon, if at all. And then, the rest of dairy, like cheese and things like that, they have good things in them. Some people are more sensitive to them, like, especially like the casein proteins. They can be pro-inflammatory. And so people can get inflammation, especially people with like autoimmune issues. Again, they just are going to be much more sensitive to inflammation. So the A1 proteins are more pro-inflammatory. This is why people are getting A2 milk, which is much less inflammatory, or raw as well. And these are less inflammatory, or even A2 raw milk, which are much better. But they are still pro-inflammatory. A2 still does have an inflammatory effect, and it's not a complete source of nutrition, right? If you're just eating a bunch of cheese, like you can't just live on cheese. Like you need other things, right? So you need the meat, you need the nutrients that are in meat, and your body chases nutrients more than it chases calories. And so if you have a nutrient complete food source, you're actually going to just want to eat. Your body's going to never going to be satisfied because you are lacking certain nutrients. And also, if you're eating carbohydrates, it raises your insulin, that blocks leptin. You get leptin sensitivity, and you will overeat because of that as well. Because leptin is telling you to stop eating, and now you're blocking that, and you think that you need to keep eating. And so, I find that people, when they eat dairy, first of all, when you tell them that you can eat dairy, but just don't eat too much of it, they end up eating way too much of it. And they're eating just like buckets of yogurt and sour cream and drinking milk and just chunks of cheese. And that's where I get worried about saying, oh, you can have some fruit sometimes. All they hear is like, I can have fruit, and they're just going to eat like a butler. You're going to have 9 mangoes a day, and that's what they do with cheese. A lot of people will do that with dairy, where I say, look, exactly the same way I just said it there, where it's just like I'm very guarded and like really don't have much of it. It's not really a complete nutrition. Just use it as a garnish, use it as a condiment. Only have it with meat, melt the cheese onto meat, or have a spoonful of sour cream on something or whatever. And they just hear, I can have dairy, and they just eat just a buttload of it. And a lot of people struggle with their weight after that. And they actually maybe even put on weight. And a lot of times when people do struggle with their weight, they're like, well, I'm not really losing weight, or it really, like, that's not a metric anyway, because you can lose fat and put on muscle, and you won't lose weight. Right, but your body habits is changing, your body composition is changing for the better, and your health is improving. And really, what this is about is health and improving your health. It's not just about weight loss. It's not just about fat loss. It's first and foremost about health. Yeah. And so, but people that are struggling with fat loss, quite often, they're eating way too much dairy, and they're having a problem with it. I do notice that people tend to eat the same amount of meat, regardless of how much dairy they eat. They'll have whatever. If they're going to have like, a pound or two of meat a day, and they have some cheese with that, if that's a condiment, they're still going to have that pound or two. And if they eat, a whole bucket of yogurt, they're going to eat that bucket of yogurt and the pound or two of meat as well. So it's bringing in more than their body needs. And so, I think that you can sort of run into a bit of trouble with that. But, for those that can tolerate dairy, I think it's okay used sparingly as a condiment, but should never really just eat it on its own, and certainly not in great quantity.
And so butter is better than cheese, right? Because it hasn't got the lactose, right? Would you say?
Yeah, most cheese doesn't have lactose either, because it's fermented. The bacteria would eat the lactose as well. But you just check. I mean, some maybe are less than others, but butter seems to be better. Like I use butter. I'll melt butter onto steaks if they're too lean. It makes them taste great, and it ups that fat percentage as well. And so things like that. Most people tolerate butter pretty well as well. And cheese, more mixed, but most people seem to do fine with it.
It's because with the butter you haven't got that. It's just fat, basically.
Yeah.
I think you're right with that all things in moderation kind of idea, which I don't really agree with. It's like, if you're trying to get someone to quit, like, I don't know, smoking or something, you're not going to say, oh, smoke once a week, that'll make it easier. It's the same with junk food, like, and then you're talking about with carbs, it's like, well, yeah, you can drink maple syrup once a week. Do you really think that's going to help carb cravings and just getting rid of it completely? It's like, absolutely not.
No, it's gonna make it worse, really, because you're gonna keep you addicted. And you have a cheat day for food. Okay, well, you're gonna keep yourself addicted to that food. You're gonna be thinking about it all week, and you're gonna be like just fantasizing about it. You're gonna be miserable. And then right when you're actually getting over it, that's when you re-up on it. So it's like you have a cheat day for cigarettes, and I'm just on Sundays I just smoke like 10 packs of cigarettes, but I don't smoke during the week. I just have a cheat day. You're gonna have a cheat day for heroin, cheat day for cocaine, and I mean that's just called a weekend, isn't it? People have cheat day for alcohol, it's like, oh no, I don't during the week. Well, it's Friday though. Well, cheat day. I'm gonna go get boozed up. That's already is a cheat day. So. And that whole idea of everything in moderation, I think is absurd on its face, right? Everything in moderation, really. Okay, so cigarettes in moderation, heroin in moderation, child abuse in moderation, genocide in moderation. As long as it's in moderation,
Yeah.
like that makes no damn sense. Hemlock in moderation. What the hell does that mean? Arsenic in moderation. I mean, just no. Some things are just bad for you. Some things are just bad in general, and you don't need them in moderation. You don't need them at all. And in fact, you don't want them. And so you need to recognize what those are. And when they say that everything in moderation, or you need a balance of things, what you're saying is that you have no idea what we're actually supposed to eat biologically, and you're just guessing, and you're just trying to cover your bases so that you don't mess up and get a deficiency. And then that's fair enough. But we do know what we're supposed to eat. We do know what we're biologically adapted to and designed to eat. And we do know what's optimal for us. And that's what we and our ancestors have been eating for upwards of 3 million years now, in near exclusion of anything else, which is just fatty meat.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to like pull in a quote from Investing from Warren Buffett. He says, like you basically said there, diversification is for people who don't know what they're doing. If you know what you're doing, you're obviously going to go for the stuff that's going to be better. Like if you've got loads of money and you're going to invest and you found some really good companies, there's no point spreading it out into some rubbish companies as well. It's like, if you know what's good, you go with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we'll start to wrap it up here, but I just wanted to ask you a bit about like your rugby, because I heard you play rugby. I've played rugby for like 10 years.
Nice.
So was that in the US?
Most in the US, but yeah, I played in the UK for a bit as well, and played in Ireland for a number of years. I played in Ireland for 6 years. So I would have played mostly there, like in medical school. I played, I went to the Royal College of Surgeons, and but then I played for Trinity College in Dublin, and that was in like the sort of top All Ireland League, 1A, I think they were in, would have been 1A, and that's sort of just below, that would be like a feeder league for like Leinster and Munster and those sorts of teams, and I didn't have time to actually play any more than that, and it was just really for fun in medical school. And then after medical school, I played still in that same sort of those same Irish leagues. Like I went for like Cork Constitution when I was down in Cork for work in my intern year. But like in the U.S., yeah, I was an All-American in high school. We did tours down to New Zealand, and I played on a number of different teams. We played in the top sort of leagues in North America and the Canadian Premiership, and the Super League in America. I was invited to several sort of all-star camps and tournaments, and trying out for the national team and things like that. I was sort of in the running for the 2003 World Cup, but I broke my leg just before that. And that was a bit disappointing. And then I was able to rehab that back up and got back on to where I was getting looked at and new stuff again, and got to the point where I was getting considered for the 2007 World Cup as well. And then I broke my hand, and so that was like I was like, right, well, I'm not doing this anymore. Just need to focus on medical school because I'd taken so many years off between my undergraduate degree. And because I went to university early and I finished early, and so I had all this time. I was like, well, look, I'm ahead of the game. I might as well sort of travel and play rugby and sort of see where that goes. And I played in England for a little bit. I played in I was National 1 then, but it's now like a championship league for Newbury, and I was there for just sort of half a season. That was actually, interestingly enough, that was when I sort of started slipping off a carnivore diet from early on, and because I was playing there and I was in just phenomenal shape. I just felt like a superhero, and I got over there and was feeling good and playing and everything was great, but I started noticing like a few months into it, I was like, well, why don't I feel as just super amazing as I normally do? And I couldn't really figure it out. I was like, am I just not pushing myself? I'm not working as hard. Like, what's going on? But looking back, that was when I started slipping off of it, because I started eating things that were like, meat that was like breaded, had like crumbs on it. I was just like, ugh, like, should I eat this? Like, this is, has this stuff in it and it's poisons. I'm like, well, dose makes a poison. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Is it that bad? It's just a little bit. And you're able to convince yourself of anything stupid at the time that you want to do. And so I was able to do that. And the biggest thing, and it absolutely affected me. It absolutely affected how I felt and my performance. But the biggest thing that it did is it sort of opened the door to me, accepting sort of plants and other things in my diet. And after that, you sort of a little bit more slipped in, a little bit more slipped in, a little bit more slipped in, without me really realizing it. And then I was sort of back to a normal diet, but still like whole food, meat-based diet, or just including, fruits and vegetables and some carbs as well. But I always cooked for myself. I never really ate junk food or anything like that. But it was, I absolutely noticed a massive, massive difference. And that was sort of the beginning of the end. And then sort of 6 years ago, I looked back and I was just like, no, humans actually are carnivores. That's just the kind of animal we are. And I knew plants were trying to kill me, get rid of these stupid things. And I was like, that was it. And I just felt, at 38, I was back doing this, and I felt better at 38 than when I was 27 playing in the Super League, trying to get on the national team, and so it makes a massive, massive difference.
Wow. Yeah. What position did you play?
Back row. So I played 7 and 8 mostly. 7 was my favorite. But
I actually would have guessed flanker. Yeah. Don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a fun position. You get to go out there and just cause havoc. Especially back then, open side flanker. You just had open license to just you had license to kill. Just go out there and just wreak havoc. And so I loved. When I was playing 7, I would be much more defensively inclined. And when I played 8, I was definitely I would still be very heavy on the defense, but I was just running lines, everything like that. It's just a bit more offensively geared, and so just mentality, I was more focused on aggressively attacking on the ball, and I was very quick off the base of the scrum. So I remember when I was playing in Newbury, the first game with them, or a few games into it, and I was playing 8, and they were like, all right, listen, look, at this level, you're never going to beat the flanker, on an 8 pick. The flankers are just too good. You're never going to beat them. just take it. So don't even try. Just take it up, set a good breakdown, and and we'll reset the ball and we'll get it out. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, we'll see about that. And like first scrum of the game, ball comes back. I don't even tell anybody what's happening. The ball just comes back. I just take it and go, and I just zip right past the flanker, cut inside the fly half, and then like step the fullback, and I scored like an 80-meter try, like on the first one. It's just like,
Wow.
Coach never after that said, just like, yeah, no, don't you let me do what I wanted to do. So yeah, so that's pretty funny. But so I was always really good at that. But I loved 7 because like I really love defense, and I thought that I could make like the biggest impact like on defense. And, if you have a really dominant number 7 who's able to really disrupt the back line and really get after the fly half and just spoil every single ball, it's very hard to overcome for the other team. And I would like, the fly half was my sworn enemy when I would play. It was like that person was just a dead man walking, and like I did everything I could to just absolutely punish them. I never did anything illegal. I never did cheap shots or anything like that. But I would put every single ounce of myself into every single point of contact, and I absolutely tried to kill any single person that came around me. And and I would just go. I'd try to see how many people I could take out of the game just by tackling them and hitting them, or having them try. Because when they were running at me, like it was very hard for me to like just run through gaps, because I wanted the contact. I wanted to smash into somebody. And so the first game I played with Newbury, guy, Vinny that I played with, it was actually here in Perth, and I was able to catch up with him again, like 13 years after we played together. He was down here, and like the first game we played together, ball I got kicked back to us, and I was back, and I fielded the ball. I'm like running it up, and he's sort of outside of me, but there was this wall. There was like, it was just like 10 guys in front of us. I passed it to him, and he's just going to run into the same wall I'm running into. So I'm like, all right, I'll just take it in. And he was just like, and so I took it in. I just basically picked a guy and just smashed him. And he was saying afterwards, he was like, yeah, I saw you. I was just like, what is this guy? He's just like, pass me the damn ball. But you just kept it in, you took it in. But then I saw you, and you just looked, and you found the biggest guy you could, and you just went and smashed him and ran him over. It's like, oh, okay, all right, I'm not too mad about that. And but on defense, yeah, you just go after people. And so I whether we won or lost the game, like I considered it a loss. I didn't do my duty if the fly half finished the game. Like that guy had to go, and and other people around him too. But like I would made it a point to punish that guy as much as as humanly possible. And so I really liked that. And I was fast enough. Like I played 7s as well. I played center and wing in 7s, and so I've got good pace, especially for my size. And so coming off a break at number 7, like I can often be the tackler and get to the fly half, get to the center, get to somebody, and disrupt that play before our backs get up to him. So I was catching the fly half a lot, and if he's just going and like you're doing a switch or something, or they're doing some sort of play, and it's just like well, I don't know where this is going, but I know I can hit you, so that's what I'm going to do. And you just drive them into the ground, and like the next time they're a bit more hesitant, skittish, and and you just keep doing that, and eventually you just break down the whole dynamic of their attack.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I've basically spent most of my time playing 10 fly half.
Yeah,
I've spent a good amount of time dealing with number 7s. Yeah, but I have also played 7 as well. That was interesting to be on the other side of that. Yeah, it's interesting to hear about you talk about that, because that's something I've not really heard you go into too much. Everyone just focuses on the diet. I'm like, no, this guy was a pro rugby player. I want to hear this. Yeah, I mean, this has been great. I really appreciate the time. I think we're pretty much rounding up here. I would love to see you do a debate with like Paul Saladino, or someone from like what would you call them? Team Sulforafane. Like the the people who always talk about hormesis, like Rhonda Patrick or someone like that.
Okay. So yeah, I did a video on that retarded nonsense. Of hormesis. Like that, I did that. This guy, Dr. Ids, who
I've seen that. Yeah,
you haven't seen that?
I have.
Oh, you have, yeah. So I mean, I never knew this guy, but I mean, he's just one of these TikTok doctor guys, and he just does these. He just basically takes something out of context and he just trashes it. And he's it's out of context. So he's not actually portraying the argument the person is putting forward, and so it's very dishonest. And he did one on mine. He's talking about the plant. I just told that story about my professor of cancer biology saying that. No, that was it. That was all this was. And he took that out of context and he tried to make it look like I was saying I wouldn't let my kids eat plants and things like that. And so this guy said, it's just like, oh, well, all these, he said that these, that plants have dozens of carcinogens, which is, let's just say that plants have dozens of carcinogens, which is not true, but let's say that it is. Oh, it's not true. Oh, is it not?
It's okay. Like a 5-minute Google search to see that it's true.
Like, seriously, like, right? I mean, this is such a well-documented fact. And so this is one of those guys that has so much conceit that he thinks that just because he hasn't come across it, it doesn't exist. And if I don't know it, it can't be true, right? So that's dumb. And so then he says, if let's just say they have carcinogens, which is not true, but let's say they did. Even if they did, they'd probably be good for you because of hormesis. Like, hold on a second. You just said they don't exist. So the things that don't exist would be good for you if they existed, but they don't? Like, what a stupid thing to say. I mean, that is the most absurd statement I've ever heard in my life. I'm sorry for getting animated about that, but it is ridiculous on its face, right? So, I mean, this is just absurd. So he's saying that this imaginary thing that doesn't exist is now hormetic, is now good for you somehow. Well, if it's made up, I guess we're just imagining, so it can be whatever we want. But the problem is they do exist. This isn't imaginary. And, if you're talking about hormesis, you have to know exact doses, right? Just like your exact doses of medication, like digitalis has an effect on people with heart failure. It can make the contractility of your heart stronger. And so it can save people and give them a better life who have heart failure. But if you don't give enough, it doesn't do anything. If you give micrograms too much, you kill them, right? Because that's what the plant's making it for. It's making it to kill you. It wants to stop your heart. You eat that plant and you drop dead. That's what that's for. It did not make digitalis hundreds of millions of years ago because someday these little, shaved apes were going to have heart failure, and we just want to help them so much. I mean, that's an absurd thing. This thing, they're doing it to kill you. They don't want you to eat them. You eat meat, you're dead. That's what that plant's saying. That's what that digitalis is there for. And so, so understanding those dosage is critical to your health. And again, he even showed a graph. It's like in this level, in this area, it's hormetic. And this level is toxic. Okay, well then you need to carefully define what that level is in that hormetic range.
For all 100.
And they don't do that. What's that? Sorry?
For all 100 compounds, and it all has to line up.
Well, that's it too. There's more than one compound. It's not just digitalis. There's 100 other things, 200 things, 500 things, 5,000 things. Plants in general make around 1 million different chemicals. Most of those are there to poison you, toxify you, hurt you, stop you from eating them, right? And so which ones are hormetic? And again, not all of these things, they may be hormetic. Well, okay, you don't know which ones. Let's talk specifically. There are 1 million of them. Go through and show me which ones are hormetic. Show me the studies on each one of those that show hormesis and what levels and what ranges they're hormetic at, right? Because they're only hormetic here. And then after there, they get toxic by their own definition, right? And so you have one that's hormetic at this level, and you've just guessed it. You just have this salad, and it just happens to be that one of those chemicals is just at that hormetic range, right? There's 500 other chemicals in there. Are they all hormetic at that? Are they all even hormetic? Are they all hormetic at that exact same level? How would you know? How could you possibly know? So this is guesswork. This is conjecture. This is, at first it was, because I've been doing this for a while and talking to people about this, and they say like, oh my God, that's ridiculous. These things don't have defense chemicals. They don't have these toxins. That's just ridiculous. That's just absurd. And then they went and did a Google search and went, oh shit, okay. All right, so they do have these defense chemicals. There actually is an entire library of books on botany that go over all of this stuff and categorize and catalog nearly 1 million of these things and name them. Shit, we named them all. Damn it. All right. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, there are defense chemicals, but they're hormetic and they're actually good for you. I mean, it's just a cop out. It's just they're just trying to fudge an answer because they don't have a good one. And so I think this is sort of the last legs of a bad argument. And they're just trying desperately to defend this and hold it together. But it's absurd on its face. I didn't know Rhonda Patrick tried to push the hormetic nonsense too, but this guy certainly did. And I've seen other people try to do it as well. A lot of the vegan sort of proponents would say like, oh yeah, well there are defense chemicals, but they're hormetic. And it's like, okay, you don't know that. They've never shown any study. They just say, oh, but they're probably hormetic, but they don't actually show you. They don't actually show studies. They don't actually show, okay, these are the chemicals that exist in kale. And these are the ones that are hormetic. This is the doses that are hormetic. After this, yeah, I agree, that's a problem. So have this much kale. They don't say that. They don't say anything like that. And that's very irresponsible, especially when you're talking about people's health and about something that they are admitting past a certain dose can cause harm.
Yeah. I think just to bring it back, I agree with like pretty much everything you said there. I think Dr. Ids was saying that they're not real, but he doesn't think they're real, but if they were, then they would be hormetic. I don't think he was saying they're not real and hormetic at the same time.
No, but that was the saying. Yeah, but that's the absurdity of it, right? He's saying they're not real, but let's say they were. If they were, they'd likely be good for you because of hormesis.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. What? That's just that's a very silly thing to say.
Oh, yeah.
And so, because again, if you're not even talking about something specific, then how are you just saying it's hormetic, right? It's an imaginary thing. You say, oh, they're not carcinogens, but let's say they are, but they're also hormetic. It's like that is internally inconsistent, and so it doesn't make sense. You just have to stop the person right there and be like, you need to go home and you need to think about this a little more, and then come back when you can have an adult thought in your head.
Yeah, I gotcha. Makes sense now. One of my favorite examples is like, well, we give chemo to cancer patients, but that doesn't mean you should just give chemo to everyone, right? Because of hormesis.
Yeah, well, that's it. And that's another one of the arguments that people like Dr. Fuhrman would say, who's pushes a whole food, raw, vegan diet. And he had the Gomes diet, which was the greens, onions, mushrooms, beans, berries, seeds. And at first he was saying, just eat a big salad. Salad's a meal. You want to eat all those sorts of things. And then, have some meat if you have to. And then that was a bit of a ruse for, raw food veganism. And that he's shown that to be the case. Since then, he said subsequently that no, any amount of meat is bad. You shouldn't eat any meat at all. Okay. But one of his arguments for mushrooms, and now we have actual studies showing that the naturally occurring toxins in mushrooms outweigh the pesticides sprayed on our crops by a factor of 10,000. Right? That was work from Professor Bruce Ames at UC Berkeley, published in 1989, and Ames found that in animal models that the toxins and carcinogens in mushrooms, like just normal white table mushrooms, white cap mushrooms, that they were 500 times more likely to cause cancer than the pesticides they were testing them against. Okay, so the idea that these things are just perfectly benign is just untrue, and it's verifiably untrue. First of all, there's so many. The WHO goes about that as well. These toxic mushrooms and things like that. They're very toxic. There's over 10,000 kinds of mushrooms, right? And think about it. How many of those don't kill you on the spot or give you a religious experience, right? There aren't many. Like the majority of these things are going to have a very serious acute phase response to you, either deadly or psychotropic. They're going to really, really mess with you, right? So some of them don't do that, but that doesn't mean that they're completely safe or even good for you. That's a very, very, very bold assumption to take with your health, and it's wrong. So he says that you should eat mushrooms because they have anti-VEGF. And anti-VEGF is something we use in cancer therapy for some cancers and chemotherapy, because it stops the proliferation of new blood vessels to that cancer tumor, right? And so, it's involved in like angiogenesis, so like new blood vessels, right? So VEGF grows new blood vessels and gives new blood supply to tumors. That's what it uses. And for your body uses VEGF. So anti-VEGF blocks that, and it stops tumors from being able to make new blood supply. So it slows it down. It's not getting blood supply. It's not getting nutrients and things like that. And so it sort of dies off in certain areas. And so he's saying, well, that's really good because that helps fight cancer. And, my question is, do you have cancer? And why are you taking chemo? Right? Like that's not necessarily a good thing. And you're taking something that has over 100 known carcinogens. It's 500 times more carcinogenic than industrial pesticides used commercially on crops. And so you're actually giving yourself something that can harm you and potentially even precipitate cancer, because it has something that might help you with cancer if you had it, which you don't. I mean, like that's a bit of backwards logic as well. And yeah, you don't, say, well, these can be used medicinally, and garlic has antibiotic effects. It's like, okay, do you have a bacterial infection which garlic fights? Then why are you taking antibiotics? Like, I don't take amoxicillin every day just because it's antibiotic. Oh, it has an antibiotic effect, so I'm just going to take, this antibiotic every day. No, we know that that's not a good thing to do. You don't actually want to kill your native bacteria and your oral biome and your gut biome and things like that. Like you have bacteria that cohabitate with you. They're actually necessary and vital, and that can actually be harmful if you do that. So, yeah, I think that those sorts of arguments don't really stand up to even minimal scrutiny.
Yeah, it's the same with what am I going to say? The mTOR argument that these longevity scientists come up with. It's like, well, mTOR can lead to cell overgrowth, which can lead to the growth of tumors. Well, it's like, okay, well, if your genome's okay, you don't have cancer, you still need to growth, you need muscles, and you need to be strong to live a long life. So we'll just turn off mTOR, completely and just waste away? No.
Yeah, well, you do need mTOR for certain things, and and a lot of these things are maybes and possiblies and could sort of scenarios. And it's like, well, that's not really hard science. That's not hard evidence that anything's going on here. There is hard evidence that we've been eating meat for millions of years, right? We do have hard evidence that there are defense chemicals in plants that can be toxic and can kill you. We know that. The WHO has an entire web page showing that in foods that we eat, if not prepared properly, it can kill you, right? And if you eat inedible plants that that we're not really able to eat, that aren't edible, you do die. You do get very sick. So we know that we have hard evidence of that. Whereas the maybe possibly something to do with mTOR, okay, you need to prove that. You need to prove when that's going to happen. And also, like you say, if you're metabolically healthy, I mean, there's a lot of, if you study cancer biology, then you'll see that there's two camps. There's the genomic theory of cancer, genetic theory of cancer, and the metabolic theory of cancer, right? So, seeing that this is just genetic changes and that's all it drives it. But that doesn't really stand the test, because in a single tumor, every single cell in there will have different genes. They don't all have the same genetic mutations, or some don't even have any genetic mutations. Some cancers don't have any genetic mutations whatsoever. They all have damaged mitochondria. They all have dysfunctional mitochondria that can't go through oxidative phosphorylation, and so they have to go through substrate level fermentation, and that is the hallmark of cancer. And so, as shown in Nobel Prize winner Otto Warburg's seminal paper in 1951, The Origins of Cancer, it showed that cancer really is a metabolic mitochondrial disease. And if you have healthy mitochondria, you can't get cancer, because healthy mitochondria suppress cancer, because healthy mitochondria are what stop proliferation. And actually, if the cell is damaged, it actually triggers apoptosis and actions apoptosis. So it says like, no, this isn't working. Bang! You need working mitochondria to do that. When the mitochondria are damaged, they can't do that. That's one of the hallmarks of cancer cells. It can't shut itself off because it's the mitochondria that do that. And then you get unregulated cell growth. That's the definition of cancer, right? And that's from damaged mitochondria, because it's the mitochondria that regulate cell growth, right? So, if you have healthy mitochondria and you're metabolically healthy, mTOR isn't playing a factor in cancer proliferation, because you're not going to develop cancer really unless you're really damaging yourself in other ways. But it's very difficult to do that, if you're eating a proper diet, which carnivore diet is, a ketogenic diet is, and it's been shown that after 3 months or a few months on even any ketogenic diet, not even necessarily a carnivore diet, that you have 4 times the amount of mitochondria and they're 4 times as effective, right? So this really, really heals and strengthens, and you replace those old junky mitochondria, replace them with a new healthy mitochondria, and you proliferate more of them as well. So your metabolic health is...
Okay guys, it's Owen here. The recording actually cut out for the last 15 or 20 minutes, which is a shame. I've put measures in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. I think the reason was I ran out of storage space on the computer. I was not expecting the podcast to go on so long, but I'm glad it did. I'll quickly talk you through kind of what we finished up with. So the last thing Dr. Chaffee was talking about was how on ketogenic and carnivore diet your mitochondria are working better, so that's a sign of health. One thing I did want to throw in, which he talked about earlier on in the podcast, how the nutritional RDAs, so how much of each nutrient you need, is different, or is probably different on a carnivore diet. And I didn't manage to loop it back then, but I just want to add this in now, give people an example. So vitamin C and glucose, the chemical structure is very similar. We'll have a picture thrown up here. And what this means is they compete for absorption, right? So different areas of your body try and utilize vitamin C or glucose, but they can't both be on the same receptor, right? Or even in your stomach, if you're absorbing it, the things that they're very similar shape, so one may be absorbed instead of the other, and your body doesn't really notice that much of a difference, right? So on a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet, a very low carb diet, you're going to be eating less glucose, right? And your blood glucose is probably going to be lower. So that means you probably don't need as much vitamin C, because there's not as much stuff competing with it, right? So we've got 100 units of vitamin C, 100 units of glucose. Well, your body, say, needs, 50. It gets 50 from glucose, 50 from vitamin C, right? But if you've got lower glucose, then more of the vitamin C that you do eat will be absorbed and utilized. So that's just one example. I'm not completely aware of that many other examples, but I would imagine there's got to be other things like that, where the foods that you are eating and the foods you're not eating are not interfering with absorption. They're not competing. Another example. So in brassica vegetables, so things like Brussels sprouts, what's some other examples of brassica vegetables? I think lettuce, maybe not. Let's see. Yeah, cabbages, mustard, plants, Brussels sprouts. Some of these contain isothiocyanates, right? What else we got? Turnips, broccoli. Yeah. So these isothiocyanates can, in high levels, affect your thyroid gland, which controls your metabolism. And that's because they compete with iodine. So iodine is this other nutrient that you need, which helps. I'm not entirely sure on the processes. It would help if I still had Dr. Chaffee here, but I'm doing my best. So you need the iodine for a healthy metabolism. If you have too many isothiocyanates, this can compete for absorption at the level of the thyroid with iodine, so you're absorbing more isothiocyanates and less iodine. So that can mess with your metabolism. Same thing there, right? There's two things competing, and your body can only absorb so much total things that are this kind of shape. Fiber also in the gut blocks absorption of foods, like a physical barrier. That's slightly different, but there's a study with I believe it's oysters and beans and corn tortillas. When they ate the oysters, which are high in zinc, the blood levels of zinc increased. When they ate the oysters with beans, so I'm not exactly sure which beans, but kind of like kidney beans, something like that, the levels of zinc were actually lower. And I think with the corn tortillas and the oysters, the zinc barely increased, or not even at all. So basically, what you eat can affect your nutrient absorption and utilization. So from what I understand, depending on what you eat can have an effect on that. I mean, I'm not an expert on this. I would recommend you go and look more into that. So I also asked Dr. Chaffee about why he decided to start his YouTube channel, right? Because as you heard, he said he worked at one point 60 hours non-stop with only 2 hours of sleep within that. The man's hustling, right? Big respect. And he's doing this YouTube thing as well, trying to help people. So he basically said to me, he basically works every day of the week. And the reason why he decided to start in the first place is he knew the power this could help people, but he kept having people coming in, patients, and asking him questions, and he kind of wished he had a bank of resources that he could just send them to, check out this. So that's kind of where it started from, I think. And now he's when he's not working in the hospital, he is doing the YouTube thing, podcasts, clips, whatever. So yeah, big respect for him, because I think he really is helping a lot of people. If you literally go to his comment sections, you'll see all these people who have reversed these diseases with carnivore diets or meat heavy diets. It's really incredible. And he says the only way he's really able to maintain this level of work and energy is through his diet. He said he thinks if he wasn't carnivore, he wouldn't be able to work like he does. Another thing I mentioned was Dr. Ken Berry and Dr. Chaffee. They did a podcast together, and Dr. Berry was talking about how he's excited for when 1% of the population has heard about this kind of diet, and then that will quickly snowball to 5%, and then that will quickly bring in a bunch more people. It will kind of compound. It's 25%, he said, real quick. It doesn't even have to be full carnivore. Look, I personally am not full carnivore. I haven't tried it yet. I plan to. But just a lot of nutritional myths. People are fed up, right? I think we see a lot of the healthcare that people have been told isn't really working. Eat lots of whole grains, avoid animal fats, avoid red meat. I think I'm kind of excited for when there's this large awakening, and the way I kind of put it was blow the doors off of the ivory towers of Western medicine, and at least have this discussion, right? It's people are getting it more, and I'm not saying you have to go tomorrow just eat meat all the time, but at least consider some of these things. If it's not working for you, if you've been told to just eat salads to try and lose weight and you constantly feel hungry, maybe it's time to try something else. Also, pretty much the last thing I asked him was where he's from, because his accent to me sounded like, it didn't sound like properly like American to me, or I'm used to. And he said that was interesting because a lot of people have picked that up. But he says he's from California. I was just wondering if like Australia or something, because he lives there now and works there. I didn't know if he was from there and then went to the States or what, but he said other people have noticed that. And when he was playing rugby, he went to like New Zealand and Ireland and stuff, and people were just like, oh, you must have just picked up the local accent. He's like, no, I just always sounded like this. Yeah, no, his voice sounds cool. This is not it's just interesting. Yeah, so, and then where to check him out. So the links will be in the show notes description of this podcast, but it's Dr. Anthony Chaffee on YouTube. That's his main kind of platform. He has a podcast. He uploads the podcast to YouTube, but he also has them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It's called the Plant Free MD with Anthony Chaffee. You've heard plant-based, now you've got the plant-free. Yeah, and then he's got, on his YouTube channel, he's got playlists he talked about. I'm just pulling it up now. Yeah, so he's got a playlist. He's got a carnivore starter kit, which he recommends, like, because some of his first podcasts were a little while ago, but if you watch that playlist, it will take you through like the basics of carnivore, because obviously his videos now or his later ones are probably getting more into different details because, well, he's already covered the basics, right? He's not just going to keep saying that over and over again. Yeah. So I just really appreciate him coming on to do this podcast. I was not expecting it to go on for like 3 hours or whatever it was, but when he said like he was happy to keep going, I was like, okay, buckle up. I'm prepared. I've got tons of questions. But yeah, just for anyone listening, like, I think especially if you have an autoimmune issue, I would strongly recommend at least checking this out. Like, go in with an open mind, see what you think. I mean, try for 30 days carnivore, 60, 90 days. That's where you really start to see the effects, I believe. I'm not an expert on this, so go and look at people like Dr. Chaffee. And yeah, I think this really can help people out. I don't think everybody needs to be doing a carnivore diet, but I think don't fear animal products. And even if you're not, even if you think like, nah, carnivore's extreme, like whatever, watch that presentation I talked about. That will be linked. Why We Are Carnivores slide presentation with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. I think the evidence is very compelling that we should be on at least high meat diets. So yeah, if you've got an autoimmune illness, I'd really recommend checking that out. Even if you're just interested in this, you're like, what is this? This has been an interesting podcast. Maybe you've changed your views a little bit. Maybe at least, I don't know, found some fertile soil to maybe get you to consider some of these things. Like me, I'm still figuring this out. I'm not 100% sure on all this, right? But go have an explore. If you're not feeling good, especially, like, I mean, you haven't really got anything to lose, have you? And like he said, you're not going to get heart disease in 30 days if you're really worried about that. But yeah, just be like honest with your health, I think, and I think it's worth a shot if you're not doing as well as you'd like, or if you're not losing the weight you want to lose, or just brain fog. Just, I think it's worth considering, right? Yeah, and just also, I just wanted to quickly mention if there's any like vegans or like vegetarians listening. I don't care if you want to eat. If you don't want to hurt animals, if you don't want to eat meat for whatever reasons, like, that's fine. I completely respect that. I'm not here to tell you what to eat. Neither is Dr. Chaffee. I don't think. It's just, I think if you're a vegan, if you're a vegetarian, and you are struggling, you're starting to see maybe some like health issues, and also mental health issues. That's what I want to talk about, because I think pretty much most vegans and vegetarians I've met have had mental health problems. Depression, anxiety, like a good amount. especially vegans, I think. Just trying to think back to the vegans and vegetarians I have actually spoke with. But like, yeah, if you're tired all the time, and also another thing is, especially in girls, like women, like iron deficiency is a big one with like periods and stuff, losing blood and low in iron, especially affecting women the most, right? The thing is with iron in plants, it's a lot harder for your body to absorb than iron in red meat. So yeah, I'm not here to tell anyone what to eat, okay, like I said, but I think if you're struggling, if you're having mental health problems, like, you would be surprised how connected diet is to so many of these things, because all mental health problems are really is a mess up of chemicals, right, in the brain, especially with there's like essential nutrients, from what I understand, in meat that you cannot get in plants without supplementation. And even some studies have shown that even if you supplement with these things, you're still not getting the same benefits as eating meat. There's like, probably because we don't fully understand everything that's in the meat. But yeah, it just concerns me a bit for some people if they're struggling and they don't even think diet's like a part of it. Another thing is protein on a vegan diet. Vegetarian diet, you probably get bored of hearing this, but if you search up DIAAS, DIAAS, the digestible indispensable amino acid score, I believe it's, who is it? The FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, something like that, in the USA. Like, it's like one of the proper boards in the USA. Yeah, Food and Agriculture Organization. I was right. So I think I was right. Is that what I said? Anyway, they did a thing and they ranked like all the proteins, right? Because there's protein, but protein's made of amino acids, and there's 9 essential amino acids you cannot get. Your body cannot make these. You need to eat them to get them. In a lot of plant foods, plant proteins, they're quite low in things like lysine, which is one of the essential amino acids which is used for muscle building. Now, I'm not saying this can't be done. I think it might be possible to do a vegan diet healthily long term. I mean, I think people do it. You can mix like protein sources so that you're getting lysine from, like, I don't know, one plant source of protein, then a different plant source of protein. You're getting the other amino acids, but you kind of need all the amino acids, right? You can't just eat high protein, because if you're only getting like, what's that one called? Phenylalanine or something like that. There's like some plant proteins really high in one, but like really low in others, but the overall protein looks high, right? But you need all of them. And if you go to the FAO DIAAS rating, it's basically all the animal foods are high quality protein, which means 90% or above. And then there's also the question of absorption. It's also harder to absorb protein from plants. So yeah, that like animal proteins are better quality. In the WHO website, like I said in this podcast, it says give kids up to age of 2 lots of meat, lots of seafood, lots of dairy, right, to help them grow. So those are things to consider. I'm not going to tell you what to eat, but if you are vegan, vegetarian, I'm not telling you tomorrow you just need to do a U-turn and just eat meat, but there have been people who, one doctor was a vegan doctor, was struggling with like erectile dysfunction and sexual problems and stuff, infertility, I'm pretty sure. He started eating salmon, a little bit of salmon next day, or like maybe not the next day, but started having erections again, right? And he was getting like some abuse, like, you've betrayed the vegan community, how dare you. But it's like, poor guy was like struggling, right? I do think at least some animal products are should be in people's. I'm not gonna. Okay, right. Like, but I mean, if you want to be healthy as much as you can, I believe you want some animal products. So, vegetarian, in my opinion, is like a lot better than vegan, because you've got cheese, you've got eggs, you've got butter, like. You see, like, because big difference between absolutely no animal products and some. So yeah, that's why I said, like, be honest with your health. I'm not to tell you what you should eat what you want. If you feel fine, that's awesome, great, keep doing what you're doing. If you're not feeling fine, maybe it's time to consider changing some things up, and diet can be a very big part of that. But yeah, that's it, I think, pretty much. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. If you made this far, really appreciate you. I really hope you managed to get some value for this time, and if you liked it, give us a like if you're on YouTube or whatever. If you want, you can follow the podcast for more. If you didn't like it, then cool. I wish you a good day regardless. And yeah, I really think this can help some people. Just be kind of open-minded to those kind of conversations. So thanks for watching. Check out Dr. Chaffee's stuff. That'll be linked in the description. As you know, the Sheesby podcast on all platforms. If you want more, let me know who I should interview next. I'd be interested to see who you guys think I should, who's interested, who needs to be talked to, who's got. I might try and maybe speak to like a vegan or someone on the other side and see what their arguments are. So yeah, thanks for listening. Have a great day, and so Owen. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.